Good morning and welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network. I'm Matthew Alvarez. It's 11:15 right now, as you see on your screen, Friday, December 19th, the Friday before Christmas, of course, as we are awaiting the 11:30 news conference there at the State Department. So this is the State Department end of year press conference with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. So we'll be going to that in just about 14 minutes from now. We have a number of also various speeches from AmFest, including, of course, the CEO of tvOS, Erica Kirk, and also we saw Russell Brand speaking yesterday, so we may have some time to go to those speeches just for a little bit. And then, of course, at 1 o'clock, the president will be at the Roosevelt Room, and he'll have an announcement there, that according to the president's public schedule. So that's what we know so far at this point, that there is an announcement at 1 o'clock from the Roosevelt Room at the White House. At 5:45 Eastern Time, the president will participate in a Christmas reception in the grand foyer of the White House. At this hour, that event is closed to the press. Tonight at 9 o'clock, the president delivers remarks on the economy from Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Our coverage starts at 4 o'clock Eastern. RSBN host Robert McNeely will be there live, speaking with a number of great patriots that are in line, just like I did in Mount Pocono, Pennsylvania just last week. So I believe it's a little bit warmer there in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, but looking forward to seeing that coverage. Again, that starts at 4 o'clock Eastern. So there's a lot going on, even though it's a Friday before Christmas. If you're looking for conservative news, if you're looking for what's going on out there in the world, but also what's happening live, you came to the right place, right here on Right Side Broadcasting Network. Of course, a lot of people at AmFest as well. We'll have our broadcast for AmFest a bit later and through the weekend. So this is a very newsy style of journalism we have for the next few days, of course, even into the weekend, right here on Right Side Broadcasting Network. All right, so again, we'll see you there at 4 o'clock a bit later. Meantime, what we're looking at is the Secretary of State's press conference that will start in just a few minutes. And, you know, earlier this week, I believe it was on Monday, and it's something we played yesterday, and we'll play this again because this is something that includes the Secretary of State speaking with the Paraguayan foreign minister and director from yesterday. We have that clip with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the Paraguayan foreign leader there. Once I hear that that's ready to go, we'll toss to that. Just to bring you up to speed on some of the things that the Secretary of State is up to. So let's go to that video now as we await Mr. Marco Rubio live from the State Department.
Thank you all for being here today. Thank you to the Foreign Minister of Paraguay for joining us here today. This is a historic step in our partnership between our two countries. This status of forces agreement, it demonstrates our shared commitment to security, regional security. The biggest threat in the Western Hemisphere that we face is the threat of transnational criminals networks, transnational terrorist networks. We've said this, if you see it in the document we put out just about 10 days ago in our national security strategy. If you look at the fundamental problem in the hemisphere, the most serious problem we have in our hemisphere is these transnational terrorist organizations who are not ideologically terrorist in many cases, but are financial and economic in their basis, but nonetheless are operating as terrorist organizations and threaten the stability and security of the region. It's a problem we see in multiple places, and we need strong partners to confront them. We need strong partners in the region that understand that that's the biggest threat in our hemisphere and are committed to working with us to confronting it. And we can do it in a way that also respects the sovereignty of our partner nations. So what we signed today is a status of forces agreement that allows us to formalize a partnership that already exists and that we want to build upon, that allows us to train together, that allows us to advance the transfer of equipment that they need for their own security, that allow us to share intelligence in real time, that allow us to operate together when necessary, and in the case of any contingencies. By the way, this includes having an opportunity to very quickly partner on humanitarian responses, be it to natural disasters or anything else. So we're excited for the ability to do this today. Paraguay is among our strongest allies in the world, but certainly in the region, and we want to continue to find concrete ways to work together and operate together. And by the way, this extends beyond the security realm. This is not just a security matter. This agreement is about security, but we also want to extend and expand our cooperation on the economic front. There's a lot of good things, positive things happening in Paraguay, a tremendous potential to make Paraguay a richer country and do so in partnership with American economic interests in a way that further binds our two countries together and makes us stronger. So we're very grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, dear Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Your commitment with our relation is quite important. 160 years of diplomatic relation between Paraguay and the United States is going on the good way. This is the opportunity to express clearly our commitment to fight against the terrorist organization, the international or transnational crime organizations. We are very committed to the freedom, to the human rights, to the rule of law, and obviously with the freedom. The freedom is one of the most important steps in which we are working, because fighting against the terrorism is allowing our people to have a better life on freedom. This is an agreement that it will strengthen our relation not only on security, as you well expressed, dear Marco. It's going to allow us to work very close to building capacities, our security forces, and will allow us as well to be closer on our relation, on our strategy on development of security.
Secretario, Nicolás Maduro dice que está listo para romperle los dientes a Estados Unidos. ¿Usted qué opina?
All right, welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network. Again, good morning and welcome to RSBN Live. On the right side, actually the left side of your screen now, that is a live picture at the State Department. We'll go live there as we will hear the year-end press conference with Secretary of...
Brief, because I just want to get to as many questions as I can. I can do English, I'll answer Spanish if you ask Spanish. And then I'll answer it in English after I answer it in Spanish. So... any other languages, won't be able to do it. But those two, and then, look, when I took over Secretary of State, I'll refer you back to the hearings we had in the Senate in January about the role I hope to play. And I believe very strongly this president was elected. One of the reasons why he was elected, very specific things, but one of the reasons why President Trump was elected is sort of an understanding among the American people that our foreign policy was in need of a complete recalibration. A recalibration because the world had dramatically changed. Many of the institutions, policies, assumptions that our foreign policy was operating under were built upon a world that no longer existed. And it required us to re-examine that. One of the assumptions that I think we had lost during this period of time, and I don't mean to make this an academic lecture, but I wanted to give you some insight into the broader thinking, as I highlighted at that hearing less than a year, almost a year ago now, is one of the assumptions was the loss of the notion of the national interest in our foreign policy. At the core of foreign policy needs to be the national interest of the United States. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't issues and things we care about in the world, but at its core, the core principle of the national interest, the core principle behind our foreign policy needs to be our national interest. So you have to, first of all, define what is the national interest, and then you have to apply it. We defined it as we are in favor of foreign policies that make America safer or stronger or more prosperous, hopefully all three, but at least one of those three. And then it requires you to prioritize. Even the richest, most powerful and influential country on earth has limited resources, has limited time. And it has to be able to dedicate those resources and time through a process of prioritization. That includes geographic prioritization. It also includes issue prioritization. And that's what we intend to do here. Then you have to have the mechanisms of foreign policy to deliver on it. In essence, you have to have a Department of State and a National Security Council and all the elements of U.S. foreign policy influence and power to deliver, to identify and then deliver on those priorities. And that's what we've attempted to do here, and I think we're well on our way to doing it. There's more work to be done. There's things we will improve upon. But generally speaking, it was the genesis behind the reorganization of the department, oftentimes applying reforms that secretaries of states of both parties, appointed by presidents of both parties, have long sought to do. And we're very proud of that going into effect and continuing to work forward. I think we generally avoided, massive disruptions to our operation, although any transition involves some disruption. But we're very happy with the way we empowered our regional bureaus, meaning our embassies and the folks at the desks here behind the regions have become more empowered and having influence over every element of our foreign policy, particularly how it's applied tactically. At the same time, one of the things we looked at is foreign aid. Foreign aid is not a separate activity of the United States government. It is an element and a tool of our foreign policy, and it should be used for the purpose of furthering the national interest. That doesn't mean we don't care about human rights. That doesn't mean we don't care about starvation. That doesn't mean we don't care about hunger. That doesn't mean we don't care about humanitarian need. What it does mean, however, is that even foreign aid, which is not charity, it is an act of the U.S. taxpayer. Now, American charities are free to give their money to whoever they want, as long as it's not a sanctioned entity. But the United States and the taxpayer money should be spent in furtherance of our foreign policy, should be spent in places and on things that further our foreign policy. And even that is not unlimited. We have a limited amount of money that we can dedicate to foreign aid and humanitarian assistance, and that has to be applied in a way that furthers our national interests. And that's what we have sought to do as well. And in that endeavor as well, we have empowered the regional bureaus and our embassies to play a dramatic role. In fact, they are not just the implementers of this. They, in many cases, are the ones that are suggesting and are leading the response. And so bringing the tools of foreign aid underneath the umbrella of our broader foreign policy has been an important and dramatic reform. Even in the midst of all that, we remain engaged around the world, including in conflicts that perhaps are not central to everyday life in America, but the president has made it a priority to be a peacemaker. And so you've seen us engaged, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or India and Pakistan, or Thailand and Cambodia, which is an ongoing challenge, or the tragedy we see now in Sudan, or the potential for further strife in South Sudan and that falling apart. I mean, no matter Armenia and Azerbaijan, we are always looking for opportunities, if possible, to play the role of a mediator that brings about the avoidance of war or the ending of conflicts. And obviously, in many of these cases, you can get people to the table and agree, and then there's the implementation process. And so we've made progress in many of these, particularly in getting them to agree to certain conditions. Obviously, it's ongoing work to make sure that those are implemented and applied. And some of these, conflicts have deep roots that go back many, many years. But we are prepared to be engaged and helpful in ways that perhaps other nations can't. We've been viewed as indispensable in that regard, and it's a role the president takes great pride in the promotion of peace around the world, and something he deserves a lot of credit for. He is personally engaged in all of this. Obviously, the big one was the situation with Gaza, which again is ongoing. There is now a ceasefire. There's that war is no longer going on at the scale and scope and all the things that were going on before. But obviously, there's more work to remain. We are still through the process of trying to implement Phase 1 and lead to Phase 2 and Phase 3. That is a long-term project, some of which will extend beyond the 4 years of this administration, but I thought was a very important achievement as well. So we have a lot to be proud about. I know you probably have some specific questions, and we can get to those, but I wanted to let that, lay that out as the preface and predicate for everything we're going to do today. So I'm going to start. How do I start? I'm going to start from the back row forward, and then I'll just juggle in between. I'll be here pretty long, so we'll get to everybody. Don't get desperate. Don't get wild. All right, I'll start with this gentleman with the white hair in the back. Yes, sir.
ask you about Gaza. U.S. wants Pakistan troops to be in Gaza. Has U.S. got a consent from Pakistan that they will be sending their troops in Gaza for peace building and peacemaking?
Yeah. Well, look, in fairness to all the countries we've talked to about being and having a presence on the ground, I think they want to know specifically, what the specific mandate, what the funding mechanism looks like. So we're very grateful to Pakistan for their offer to be a part of it, or at least their offer to consider being a part of it. I think we owe them a few more answers before we can ask anybody to firmly commit. But I feel very confident that we have a number of nation states acceptable to all sides in this who are willing to step forward and be a part of that stabilization force. And certainly, Pakistan is key if they agree to do so. But I think we owe them a few more answers before we get there. We're trying to make a lot of progress here with I think the next step here is announcing the Board of Peace, announcing the Palestinian Technocratic Group that will help provide daily governance. And then once that's in place, I think that will allow us to firm up the stabilization force, including how it's going to be paid for, what the rules of engagement are, what their role will be in demilitarization and so forth.
Thank you.
Next to you, in the back.
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for doing this. I want to start with Russia-Ukraine. You mentioned that...
Easy stuff, yeah.
You mentioned your efforts. There are talks going on right now, starting today and this weekend in Miami. What are your expectations from those talks? And the President yesterday made it clear he expects Ukraine to basically step up before Russia walks away. If you wake up in Odessa, if you're Ukrainian, this morning seeing Russians are bombing, your city, or if you turn on TV and listen to Putin, what he says, why would the Ukrainians, ignore what the Russians are saying publicly and believe in what they're hearing?
Yeah, look, there's a reason why this war hasn't ended, and that is because there's complex factors at play. I know that sounds like a throwaway line, but it's true. What we have tried to do in this entire process, and let's be clear about this. I mean, the United States is engaged in this. The President says this, and I'll translate what I think he's trying to say to you in all of this, and I think he's been pretty clear about it. It's not our war. It's a war in another continent. We have equities. We have engagement in this war, but it's not our war per se. But we have been told by everybody, I think everybody would agree, that there's only one nation on earth, there's only one entity on earth that can actually talk to both sides and figure out whether there's a way to end this war peacefully. And that's the United States. And we've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy at the highest levels of our government. I believe, President Trump has had more meetings with foreign leaders and others on the war in Ukraine than on any other subject, including trade. He's invested a lot of time. Steve and Jared have invested time. I've invested time. The Vice President, the Secretary of War, others, Secretary of Treasury, and more, have invested a tremendous amount of time and energy in this. And what we're trying to figure out here is, what can Ukraine live with and what can Russia live with? Sort of identify what both sides' positions are and see if we can sort of drive them towards each other to some agreement. Wars end generally in one of two ways. Surrender by one side for another, or a negotiated settlement. We don't see surrender anytime in the near future by either side, and so only a negotiated settlement gives us the opportunity to end this war. A negotiated settlement requires two things: both sides to get something out of it, and both sides to give something. And we're trying to figure out what can Russia give and what do they expect to get, what can Ukraine give and what can Ukraine expect to get. In the end, the decision will be up to Ukraine and up to Russia. It will not be up to the United States. So that's the role we are trying to play in this. And that's why you see so many meetings going on. This is not about imposing a deal on anybody. It is about determining what both sides expect and need to have and what both sides are prepared to give in return for it, and figuring out whether we can have those two overlap. And of course, that takes a lot of time and a lot of hard work. It can't generally be done in the media or in press conferences. I think we've made progress, but we have ways to go. And obviously, the hardest issues are always the last issues. Yes. All right, I'm going to go to the next row. That gentleman right there with the glasses. Well, right behind you, because you're not the next row. That's the next row. Right there. Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to ask how you
I'm
view...
sorry. I didn't see. Okay, go ahead. You can start. I hadn't seen you. I'd seen him. But you can go because you're first on that row. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
As a well-oiled machine, ladies and gentlemen. So go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
Thanks. I'd like to ask how you view recent escalation of tensions between Japan and China. You've been known for your tough rhetoric towards China over the years. Do you condemn China's recent provocative actions against Japan?
Yeah, no, I think I've been nice to China, in terms of the work we have to do with them. And, I had another job. My job now is I represent the President of the United States and the United States in foreign diplomacy, and I think we've made good progress with the Chinese. The Japanese are a very close ally of the United States. I think these tensions are pre-existing. We understand that's one of the dynamics that has to be balanced in that region, and I believe that we feel very strongly that we can continue with our strong, firm partnership and alliance with Japan and do so in a way that continues to allow us to find productive ways to work together with the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government. Look, there'll be tensions, there's no doubt about it. I mean, at the end of the day, China is and it will continue to be a rich and powerful country and a factor in geopolitics. We have to have relations with them. We have to deal with them. We have to find the things we are able to work together on. And I think both sides are mature enough to recognize that there will be points of tension now and for the foreseeable future. Our job as part of responsible statecraft is to find opportunities to work together, because I think if there's a global challenge that China and the U.S. can work together on, I think we can solve it. And there'll be points of tension. We will recognize that, and our job is to balance these two things. I think both sides understand that. And I think we can do that without imperiling or in any way undermining our very firm commitment to our partners in the Indo-Pacific. That includes not just Japan, but South Korea, and obviously if you extend further out, I don't want to leave anybody out, but India and Australia and New Zealand and all the other countries. And we also have growing and burgeoning relationships with countries like Vietnam and even Cambodia that we really haven't had, very close contacts with historically. But we've talked to them a lot lately, obviously through the context of the conflict going on with Thailand, but also to figure out opportunities to work together strategically. And I say Thailand, of course, we've had a very long and strong strategic alliance with them for many years. All right, now, yes, sir.
Thank you. Gracias, señor secretario. 2 puntos concretos en español. Bajo esta lógica hemisférica, ¿han considerado ampliar la presión más allá de Venezuela o Colombia a regímenes como los de Nicaragua o Cuba? Y segundo, esta semana en el Congreso se denunciaba que México está mandando decenas de buques petroleros a Cuba con la preocupación de que eso financia la dictadura. ¿Debería México reconsiderar esta política de asistencia al régimen cubano?
I'm going to answer in Spanish if that's okay, guys, and then I'll do it in English as well. And does somebody do closed caption on this? Can they do it? It doesn't matter because I'm going to say the same thing in English. Mira, la amenaza más importante que existe en la región es estos grupos terroristas criminales. Es la amenaza que enfrenta Colombia, la amenaza que enfrenta el hemisferio entero, pero es la raíz de la violencia en Ecuador, en México, en todo Centroamérica, en todos estos países. Es la amenaza más primordial de la región. Entonces tenemos gobiernos que cooperan en nuestros esfuerzos en contra de eso. Panamá, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, la República Dominicana. No dejo a nadie fuera, pero son muchos que cooperan. Tenemos y seguimos teniendo muy buenas relaciones con los equipos de seguridad de Colombia. Entiendo que el presidente de Colombia es una persona inusual, pero encima de eso tenemos, al nivel institucional, tenemos muy buenas relaciones y con México. El gobierno de México está haciendo más en este momento en el tema de seguridad que jamás en su historia. Queda mucho por hacer, pero tenemos cooperación. En el tema de Venezuela no tenemos eso, tenemos un régimen ilegítimo que no simplemente no coopera con Estados Unidos, sino coopera abiertamente con elementos criminales. Por ejemplo, el ELN y la FARC operan abiertamente desde territorio venezolano. Entidades de narcotráfico operan abiertamente y con la cooperación del régimen de Maduro para mandar drogas como cocaína a Estados Unidos a través del Caribe, creando una situación muy grave de seguridad en muchísimos países, inclusive Trinidad, República Dominicana, etc. Así que Estados Unidos lo que simplemente está buscando es la seguridad del hemisferio, que incluye, por ejemplo, Haití también. Y no hemos visto enfocado en eso. Obviamente los esfuerzos en contra de los barcos narcotraficantes saliendo de Venezuela han recibido mucha atención. Lo que no se habla lo suficiente, lo que estamos haciendo también en el mar Pacífico, donde hay esfuerzos andando también. La diferencia es que ahí tenemos la cooperación de gobiernos amigos. Lo que no se está hablando es lo que estamos haciendo junto con los mexicanos. Lo que no se está hablando es lo que estamos haciendo para crear una fuerza de estabilidad antipandilla dentro de Haití. Lo que no se está hablando es toda la cooperación que existen con todos estos gobiernos para llevar a cabo esta guerra en contra de estos elementos terroristas, criminales, que operan abiertamente dentro de nuestra región y que amenazan los estados de esta región. La buena noticia es que este nuevo año nos va a traer más gobiernos en el hemisferio que están dispuestos a cooperar en países como Bolivia, en Chile. Obviamente ya tenemos grandes amistades en lugares como Paraguay y Argentina. Y en fin, la reelección del presidente en Ecuador, la cooperación que existe en muchos países y esperemos poder ampliar esas relaciones con otros países también. Así que el esfuerzo se trata de eso y en eso estamos enfocados. Y obviamente tenemos que determinar cuáles son las fuentes de inseguridad en la región Y esa fuente, la razón por la cual Venezuela ha recibido tanta atención, es porque Venezuela es un país que no simplemente, es un régimen ilegítimo que no simplemente no coopera con nosotros, sino abiertamente coopera con elementos criminales y terroristas, incluyendo Hezbollah, Irán y otros. Y obviamente estos grupos narcos cooperan abiertamente desde ahí. You know, the question that and it's a question many of you might have as well, is when it comes to the Western Hemisphere, the single most serious threat to the United States from the Western Hemisphere is from transnational terrorist criminal groups, primarily focused on narco trafficking, but they're in all sides businesses as well. So the good news is we have a lot of countries in the region that openly cooperate and work with us to confront these challenges. Mexico, their level of cooperation with us is the highest it's ever been in their history. Throughout Central America, for the most part, except for maybe Nicaragua and to some extent Honduras, we've had great cooperation from Ecuador, from El Salvador, from Ecuador being in South America, but across the Pacific coast where we're also undertaking efforts. Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, these are all nations that cooperate with us openly in search of stability in the region. You move to the Caribbean basin, in Trinidad, in Guyana, in Jamaica, in the Dominican Republic, countries that openly cooperate with us. Even Colombia, despite its unusual president, has institutions in that country that work very closely with us, and those ties remain unimpeded and unaffected. So all of this is very positive. There's one place that doesn't cooperate, and it's the illegitimate regime in Venezuela. Not only do they not cooperate with us, they openly cooperate with terrorist and criminal elements. For example, they invite Hezbollah in Iran to operate from their territory. But they also allow the ELN and the FARC dissidents not just to operate from inside of Venezuelan territory, to control Venezuelan territory, unencumbered, unimpeded. On top of that, we know that they are in cahoots with drug trafficking organizations. It's not just that they don't work with us against these organizations. Okay? It's that they openly, cooperate with these guys and allow them to operate. So these guys are, marching in and out, doing whatever they want from Venezuelan territory, and it's a challenge. And so that's why that's received so much attention. But I would urge you to not just focus on that, but also focus on all the other things we're doing in the region, including, for example, standing up this gang suppression force in Haiti, which we were looking for 5,500 forces. We already have pledges of up to 7,500 forces from a variety of countries. We've seen donors step up to fund that effort. That's a very important effort. It all ties together cohesively. But the goal here is to bring security and stability to the hemisphere, to the region we live in, okay, which has not received enough attention. To bring the elements of American power to achieve that, to do it in partnership with as many countries as are willing to work with us in that regard. That's the goal here, and it's comprehensive and involves more than just one place. What makes Venezuela stand out is that the regime there actually cooperates with the terrorists. Yes, sir. In that row right there. Yeah, right there in the middle.
On the hemisphere, the White House recently put out the national security strategy, essentially reorienting towards the Western Hemisphere.
It was
How
good,
is this
right?
strategy going to? Yeah.
Well, I was involved.
So
in
you can
that.
answer from both hats, I guess.
Exactly.
But how is that strategy going to dictate your relationship with other hemispheric powers like Canada and Mexico?
No, I mean, we want to partner with as many people. I mean, they face the same threats that we do. I mean, it's Mexican mayors that are being assassinated in public squares. It's Mexican journalists that are being assassinated. It's parts of Mexico and institutions in Mexico that in some cases are compromised, usually through threat by these elements. They recognize it, which is why they're partnering with us. Of course we want to work with other governments in the region to confront this challenge, and in most cases we have cooperative places. Now, we don't have that from Nicaragua or Cuba, but obviously didn't have it historically from Bolivia. We hope and expect that will change. And we certainly don't have that from the regime in Venezuela, who actually don't just not cooperate with us, they openly cooperate with narco-trafficking elements that use Venezuela as a transshipment point. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Today you had the second round of direct negotiations between Lebanon and Israel. Do you foresee a potential deal between these two countries without another round of war? And the second question, if I may, on Sudan. We know, Mr. Secretary, it's a civil war, but also there's a regional factor here. Where the U.S.
regional what, I'm sorry?
Factor in this
yes.
war. Where the U.S. stands here, and what's a red line for you? Is a divided Sudan is a red line for the U.S.?
Yeah, let's separate the two because they're both easy questions, right? So the first one is we're hopeful. Look, at the end of the day, the goal everybody shares is a strong Lebanese government that controls the country and Hezbollah is disarmed. They're no longer an armed element that can threaten Israel's security. That's the goal here. And we have tried to, in a cooperative way, to do everything we can to empower the Lebanese government to have the ability to do that. And so I hope that's what these talks are aimed towards, and we'll be supportive in every way we can to achieve that outcome. What I think is abundantly clear to everybody is no one is in favor of a Hezbollah that can once again threaten the region, act as a direct Iranian proxy, and obviously if they threaten Israel, we're not going to have peace. So we are hopeful that the talks between Lebanese authorities and the Israelis will create outlines and a way forward that prevents further conflict. I think I don't speak for the Israeli government. I can only tell you and echo what they've said publicly, and that is that if they feel threatened by Hezbollah, they will take actions in their defense against them. So we all would hope that we could avoid that, right? We would all hope that in order to have peace, you have to avoid that, and the best way to avoid it is to have a strong Lebanese government that can actually control the country, and that Hezbollah is no longer an armed threat to Israel or to the Lebanese state. And that's what we're committed to hoping to achieve. And we hope that, I can't speculate on what the talks will lead to, but we'll do everything we can to make them productive. On Sudan, you've rightfully outlined, I mean, there are regional elements to this. I mean, there are clearly both sides, you know, the SAF and the RSF have supporters from outside of Sudan's borders that are involved, and we've been engaging with those countries. It's not just countries that are providing them weaponry and equipment, it's also countries that are providing transshipment, particularly to the RSF to receive weapons, in some cases advanced weaponry. Our goal right now in the short term, and what we've emphasized to everybody, including in my calls with leaders in the UAE, leaders in Saudi Arabia, we're very engaged in that. Our special envoy, Mossad Boulos, just returned from the region, meeting with the Egyptians, with the Saudis, with the UAE, and others. We've also been in collaboration with the UK on some of this. Our goal, the immediate goal we have, is a cessation of hostilities, okay, a humanitarian truce going into the new year that allows humanitarian organizations to be able to deliver aid to the people in great distress. Right now, that's not possible. We are hearing, continue to see reports of humanitarian convoys actually being struck on their way in. And so you can just imagine what's amazing to us is these convoys are struck and the rest of the convoy continues. That's how committed these groups are. But what we said to everybody on it is that what's happening there is horrifying. It's atrocious. That one day the story of what's actually happened there is going to be known and everyone involved is going to look bad. And we have played the role we have played is a convening role in bringing the parties to the table. So I think we will know more very soon about whether this is possible. One of the challenges and frustrations in Sudan has been that one side or the other will commit to certain things, and then they won't live up to those commitments. They'll agree to anything and implement nothing. And oftentimes what happens is when one side feels like they're making advances in the battlefield, they don't necessarily see the need to concede at that point because they believe they're on the verge of achieving some success on the ground, and a truce would set them back. But what we've emphasized is none of these groups can operate without the support they're receiving externally. So we have been engaging with the countries involved from the outside to ensure that they are at the table and that they are pushing for the same outcome that we want, which is phase one, a humanitarian truce that at a minimum allows us to deal with the humanitarian calamity that occurs there. And obviously we hope that while that truce is ongoing, we can focus on the other elements that led to this conflict and help to resolve some of those. But our number one priority we're focused on, 99% of our focus is this humanitarian truce and achieving that as soon as possible. And we think that the new year and the upcoming holidays are a great opportunity for both sides to agree to that. And we're really pushing very hard on that regard. Yes, sir. Right there, because I missed
Secretario
you.
Rubio, en español,
Sí.
si me permite. El presidente Trump ha llamado al presidente Gustavo Petro drug leader y ha usado, digamos, términos
Bueno, él también ha dicho cosas a nosotros.
Totalmente,
Okay,
totalmente.
Claro, okay.
Secretario Rubio, ¿hay alguna prueba o por qué esta administración llama a Gustavo Petro? Quisiera saber por qué esta administración llama a Gustavo Petro un líder del narcotráfico. Y por último, secretario, si usted considera eventualmente ante la invitación que hace Gustavo Petro ahora al presidente Trump o a usted ir a Colombia y conversar con Gustavo Petro.
No, nosotros conversamos con cualquiera. Desafortunadamente es una persona que no es muy estable en su pronunciamiento, pero no vamos a permitir que la actuación de un presidente que al fin su término termina pronto vaya a dañar la relación que existe entre Estados Unidos y Colombia, una relación muy cerca, una relación que se ha establecido a través de los últimos 50 años, una relación importante comercial, diplomática, militar, de seguridad, uno de los grandes socios y aliados que tenemos en la región. Y lo que queremos, no vamos a permitir que cualquier tipo de problema que existan con un individuo vaya a hacerle daño a esta relación tan importante Esperemos que en el futuro exista la oportunidad de tener más cooperación a los niveles más altos del gobierno colombiano, pero no vamos tampoco a dañar, o no queremos dañar, a todas las relaciones que tenemos y los enlaces que tenemos, incluso con individuos en el cuerpo legislativo y también con oficiales electos al nivel local. Muchísimos alcaldes y de diferentes lugares dentro de Colombia que también tienen muy buena relación con Estados Unidos y la amplia y estrecha relación que existe entre nuestros pueblos también. The question is again about Colombia. I said, look, we're not going to let sort of the pronouncements of an unstable individual over there to impact. We don't want to let it impact our broader relationship with Colombia. It's an important relationship, an important alliance. It extends through commercial, people to people, cultural, obviously security and stability, all of these things. And our job is to try to the extent possible, maintain those strong ties between Colombia and the United States and not allow them to be imperiled by the pronouncements of one person. We would hope to see a day soon in which we have better relations with the leader of that country, but we're not going to let the fact that that doesn't exist now, we're going to do everything possible to not let that impact the relationships we have with the people of Colombia, with the nation, with their economy, with their security forces, which are very important. This is a very important alliance, a very important strategic partnership, which we've built up through a lot of hard work over decades. And we're not going to let that fall apart because of one person. If that changes and he changes, that would be great. And obviously, in May there'll be a new president there, and there'll be elections, and we'll work hopefully more cooperatively with whoever replaces the current president. But that's up to the people of Colombia. Did I not get your question? Go ahead.
Thank you. Returning to Gaza, what is the U.S. understanding of what Hamas is willing to concede on disarmament? Reports suggest that Hamas might hand over its heavy weapons but retain its smaller arms. Is the U.S. prepared to accept partial disarmament as sufficient?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the details of those types of negotiations. Let me just couch it to you this way. Everyone wants peace. No one wants a return to a war. If Hamas is ever in a position in the future that they can threaten or attack Israel, you're not going to have peace. Okay? You're not going to convince anyone to invest money in Gaza if they believe another war is going to happen in 2 to 3 years. So I would just ask everyone to focus on what are the kind of weaponries and capabilities that Hamas would need in order to threaten or attack Israel as a baseline for what disarmament needs to look like. Because you're not going to have peace. If 2 years from now Hamas is launching rockets or killing Israelis or carrying out, God forbid, another 7th of October type terrorist attack and so forth, you're not going to have peace. So who's going to invest in a peace? Who's going to invest in rebuilding a place that's going to get destroyed again in a future war? So that's why disarmament is so critical. Now, what that entails, we're going to leave that to the technical teams to work on. It would have to be something, obviously, that they're willing to agree to, that our partners can push them and pressure them to agree to. It also has to be something that Israel agrees to. In order for that to work, both sides have to agree on it, and we need the space to do it. But that's the way to think about it, okay? You cannot have a Hamas that can threaten Israel in the future. If they can, you won't have peace. So that's the goal. All right. Who's left in that row? Right there with the mustache. Or the...
Does the U.S. have the goal of removing Maduro from power? Do you expect any regime change this 2026? I would appreciate if you could answer both in English and in Spanish.
In Spanish.
Yeah.
It sounds so much better in Spanish when I answer that question.
No, but for my
So I'll start in English. Look, our goal is regional stability and security and the national interest of the United States. The national interest of the United States, specifically when it comes to Venezuela, is as follows. We have a regime that's illegitimate, that cooperates with Iran, that cooperates with Hezbollah, that cooperates with narco-trafficking and narco-terrorist organizations, inclusive not just protecting their shipments and allowing them to operate with impunity, but also allows some of them to control territory, the ELN and the FARC-D. Okay? The ELN and the FARC dissidents operate openly. They have like open camps that they control territory inside of Venezuela. That is our national interest, and that is what this is focused on. And that's what the president's been focused on. And that's what we're conducting. And that's what we have been focused on the entire time, because that is the threat to the national interest of the United States. Now, do we consider Maduro legitimate? No. And by the way, guys, when I say these things about Maduro and his role in narco-trafficking, it's not, I hear his reports, Marco Rubio says it, it's not me. A grand jury in New York, in the Southern District of New York, okay, a grand jury in the Southern District of New York was presented evidence and came back with an indictment, not just against Maduro, by the way, but against a bunch of people in his government for narco-trafficking. A bunch. He had, his nephews or the nephews of his wife indicted, convicted in the United States for narco-trafficking. Like this was until President Trump started doing something about these narco-trafficking links. Nobody disputed that Maduro and his regime was in cahoots with narco traffickers. Not to mention the fact that they unleashed Trinidad gangs on the United States. They've unleashed, a mass migration event, perhaps the largest in history. 8 million people have left Venezuela since 2014. So also destabilizing all the countries in the region who have had to assume people that are fleeing this illegitimate regime. So, but nobody disputed the drug links. So that's what the president's been focused on, and that's the problem. And that's the problem in Venezuela. En el caso de Venezuela es muy simple. Es un régimen ilegítimo que coopera abiertamente con Irán, con Hezbollah y con grupos narcotraficantes. Incluso la ELN y la FARC que operan abiertamente dentro del territorio venezolano encima de los demás. Entonces, la amenaza que enfrenta los Estados Unidos es eso, que tenemos un régimen ilegítimo que coopera abiertamente con elementos terroristas, y por eso consideramos el régimen de Maduro un régimen terrorista, cooperan abiertamente con elementos terroristas que amenazan la seguridad de Estados Unidos. Punto. Ese es nuestro interés y en eso estamos enfocados. Okay, next row right there. You, yeah.
With all due respect for my colleagues, I'm going to ask this one in Spanish.
Okay.
Señor secretario, usted acaba de decir que no espera o que no es la intención de Estados Unidos que las diferencias con el presidente Gustavo Petro generen afectaciones para la relación con Colombia. Pero la verdad es que sí las han generado. Colombia fue desertificada, el presidente Donald Trump ordenó suspensión de recursos de cooperación para nuestro país y ya se están viendo consecuencias en materia de seguridad en Colombia. Nada más anoche asesinaron a 6 soldados colombianos, el ELN, con un atentado terrorista. Y la gran pregunta en Colombia hoy es ¿qué va a pasar el próximo año si Colombia elige un presidente de izquierda? Si las relaciones de Estados Unidos, las buenas relaciones con Colombia y el respaldo de Estados Unidos va a depender de que el pueblo colombiano elija un presidente que sea visto con buenos ojos por parte de esta administración.
No, pero que esto no se trata de izquierda ni derecha, esto se trata de una persona que simplemente no coopera con nosotros en estos esfuerzos. De eso se trata. Al final del día, el pueblo colombiano va a escoger el próximo presidente. Es una democracia, tienen elecciones, esperemos que se cumplan todos los requisitos, tienen una larga historia de cumplir los requisitos democráticos. Aquí no estamos diciendo que Petro no fue electo democráticamente, aquí nadie dice que no fue así. Pero en fin, esto no se trata de izquierda ni derecha, se trata de tener en poder un presidente que coopera con nosotros. Obviamente, sin duda, la postura que era tomada en contra de Estados Unidos ha afectado a nuestra relación, no hay duda de eso ninguna. Estamos tratando de limitar eso lo más posible, pero también tenemos intereses que tenemos que proteger. Y tampoco vamos a pretender, cuando tienes un presidente diciéndole a los elementos de seguridad que no cooperen con Estados Unidos, eso no lo podemos ignorar. Pero por otra parte, entendemos que tenemos dentro del sistema colombiano, incluso al nivel legislativo, en el Congreso, en el Senado, también alcaldes y otros líderes políticos de ese país que sí quieren buenas relaciones con Estados Unidos, y incluso líderes que no son de derecha, que son de izquierda, pero que entienden la importancia de esa relación. Pero esto no se trata de ni izquierda ni derecha, se trata que si va a cooperar con Estados Unidos o no. Tenemos una larga historial de cooperar con Colombia, que fue un ejemplo y un modelo para la región, y ahora tenemos algo un poco menos, que es lamentable. Ojalá que eso cambie. The question was about whether the U.S. relations to Colombia is dependent on whether they elect a leader that's center-right or center-left. It has nothing to do with left or right. It has to do very simply with whether or not we have a leader there that we can work with. The U.S.-Colombian relationship, especially our security relationship, but also our economic one with a free trade agreement, is a model. It was a model for the region. We tried to replicate that. Everybody would use Plan Colombia as an example of what you need to do in these other places. And we want to continue that. Now, no doubt, when you have the president of a country saying some of the things and ordering some of the things that he's ordered, it's going to have an impact on some of that relationship. Our job is to try to preserve and protect as much of that relationship as possible, but it will be impacted. But it doesn't matter whether the next president is center-right or center-left. That's not the issue. The issue is whether the next president is someone who's going to, once again, cooperate with the United States and restart these relations. That's what we seek. And if President Petro changes in his stance, perhaps that could change as well. But if he doesn't, obviously, it'll be up to the people of Colombia to elect their next president. Yes, ma'am, right there in the middle. I don't want you guys to think I'm only picking the Spanish ones, okay? I actually don't know who any, well, there's a list here, but I can't even read it without these glasses. All right. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Perdón.
Secretario Rubio, usted lleva años denunciando el régimen de Nicolás Maduro y estuvo, entiendo, hace poco en una conversación telefónica donde hablaron el presidente Trump y Nicolás Maduro. Quisiera preguntarle cómo sintió a Nicolás Maduro en esa conversación, usted que lo conoce desde hace años, pues su comportamiento, si siente que está acorralado como reportan los medios, si está abierto a irse a otro país a cambio de un indulto, si ustedes estarían pensando en reunirse con él ¿Cómo fue esa conversación? O sea, ¿qué nos puede contar de el efecto que está teniendo sobre la presión?
Yo no voy a comentar sobre ninguna conversación del presidente Trump con cualquiera del mundo, si existió o no existió. Yo no voy a comentar sobre eso. Voy a repetir lo que he dicho ya. Esto se trata de algo muy simple. Y esto se trata de los intereses nacionales de Estados Unidos. Y hay una amenaza regional que existe. Y en el caso de Venezuela no tenemos cooperación. Para empezar, que es un régimen ilegítimo. Segundo, que es un régimen que no coopera, es antiamericano en todos sus pronunciamientos y actuaciones. Y tercero, es un régimen que no solamente no coopera con nosotros, sino abiertamente coopera con elementos peligrosos, terroristas y criminales. Incluso ellos mismos lo son. Entonces es difícil llegar a un acuerdo con terroristas que están abiertamente cooperando con estos elementos peligrosos que amenazan la seguridad de Estados Unidos. Encima de eso no voy a especular más.
Pero va a haber guerra, secretario, porque ahorita en Colombia todo el mundo se está levantando, en Venezuela, con la posibilidad de que haya una guerra entre Estados Unidos y Colombia.
Nosotros estamos protegiendo el interés nacional de Estados Unidos. Yo creo que, en fin, ese es nuestro derecho. Y también le diré que en Colombia debe haber mucha preocupación, que ha habido un ataque el día antes de ayer, o fue ayer, de ELN, o la FARC, creo que fue ELN, y ¿de dónde operan ellos? Abiertamente, de territorio venezolano, abiertamente, como si fueran un país soberano, operando abiertamente dentro del territorio venezolano. It's the same question, guys, and that is, the bottom line is very simple. Our interest in Venezuela and in the region is the national interest of the United States, and in Venezuela we have an illegitimate regime that not only does not cooperate with the United States, but openly cooperates with narco-terrorists and others who threaten the national security of our country. The gentleman in the middle. I'm going to try to get to everybody, I promise. But you guys, by then, your questions will be
Thank you,
more
Mr. Secretary.
specific.
You said a few moments ago that everyone wants peace for Gaza, and yet by any metric, the Israelis are flouting the ceasefire that President Trump negotiated by killing an average of 2 children a day, not allowing the agreed-upon humanitarian aid into Gaza. How long can this continue? How long can the Israelis be allowed to show such disrespect to President Trump?
Well, that's your characterization of it, about the term disrespect. What I would say is this. This was, first of all, it was a miracle that it happened in the first place. We all understand how difficult it was for that to come to the conclusion that it did, where the bombing and everything else, the scale and scope of what we saw ended, all the hostages were released, and we have relative peace right now for the most part, despite the things you're pointing to. That was very difficult. But this is not easy. Peace is a verb. It's not. It's an action. It's not a sentiment. Every single day will bring challenges. Every single day. We also have had instances, for example, over the last couple of weeks, where Hamas elements emerged from a tunnel, attached an explosive device to the side of a vehicle, and injured and almost killed Israeli soldiers. We still have this threat. We still have and see every single day Hamas openly taking steps to strengthen themselves within inside of those places in Gaza that they still control. We saw early on the atrocities they were committing in the streets against people as they were trying to show people how strong they were. So I don't think I'm standing here to tell you this is going to be easy. This is an hour-by-hour, day-by-day challenge. It's one of the reasons why we have stood up this center there in operating in Israel, in partnership as well with another cell that exists in a regional country. It's why every single day there are meetings among both intelligence, diplomatic, and military officials of multiple countries that help bring about this deal to manage this. And that's why it is so critical. It is so critical and so key that we move to complete this first phase, that we move to put in place the board of peace, get everybody agree to be a part of it, move to put in place this Palestinian technocratic organization so that they can begin to provide some governance structure, and move to put in place the stabilization force. That's the goal here, but it's not going to be easy. Every day will bring new challenges to that, and we recognize those challenges are coming from all sides.
Very quick follow-up there, but who's going to want to be a part of a stabilization force if Israel is effectively using Gaza as a free fire zone?
Well, these are the things that we're working through right now. That's why it didn't happen yesterday. That's why we didn't, I don't mean yesterday literally, that means why we're not there yet. This is the hard work of diplomacy and peacemaking. Peacemaking isn't just signing a piece of paper, it's actually complying with it. And compliance oftentimes requires, in many cases, in most cases, requires daily, constant follow-up and nurturing. So that is why we are in such a hurry, and I say as a priority, to get to this point where we have the stabilization force in place, overseen by the Board of Peace, and ultimately a Palestinian technocratic entity that can increase in its capability to provide governance. The stronger they are, the weaker Hamas will be in terms of threatening Israel, and I think the more security Israel should feel and the less need for some of these things to happen. But no one's claiming this is going to be easy. We have to work on this every single day. We have people in this building and deployed abroad. This is all they do.
24 hours a day, day after day, elements of the State Department, the Department of War, and all other agencies, including Jared and Steve, and even myself, who talk or do something about. There isn't a day in the last, since this was signed 2 months ago, that I haven't had to do something with regards to making progress on the phases of the ceasefire. Yes, ma'am. Right next.
Thank you, Mr.
I'm
Secretary.
sorry. I'm going to get to you guys. I'm coming. See, I'm going down the rows like this.
Thank you.
So right behind you, 'cause I'm still in that row.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you for having the
Has
briefing.
anyone ever done this where they go like all the rows?
No.
You're going to look so good to your editors. No? All right, go ahead.
Caroline Lumetta with World News Group. Several faith-based organizations have been calling on the administration to reopen the U.S. refugee admissions program, particularly for religious minorities facing persecution. That includes Afghanistan, Syria, Iran. Is it going to be a goal in 2026 to expand that program again beyond South Afrikaners?
Yeah, so here's the problem, okay? In the last 4 years, we had a flood of people enter this country through a variety of means. So that's what we confronted. We have to stop that. And we did. We've been successful. You see the border secure, the number of illegal entries has completely collapsed. And now we're facing a second challenge, and that is we've admitted a lot of people into the United States. And perhaps the overwhelming majority of them are not bad people and so forth. This is all true. But there are people, we know, okay, for a fact, that there are people in this country who got in through some form of vetting that was wholly insufficient. And we've seen tragic evidence of that very recently, including people that we claim to have vetted. So, why does that happen? Because there are some places where you can't vet people. You can only vet people on the basis of information you have about them. But that information is oftentimes dependent on whether there's some local authority that actually has any information about them. Okay, so that is the challenge we're facing, which is why the president has sort of put a stop to all of these things until these systems for admitting people into our country can be improved. But I think everyone would understand that after a flood of 15 to 20 million people into our country, almost unrestrained in some extent, over the last 4 years before taking over in January of this year, there's a desire in our country to put a stop to that until we can fix these processes to ensure that not only do we know who's in the country now, but in the future, we're not going to face some of these challenges that we faced in the past. So, look, the United States remains the most generous country in the world when it comes to legal immigration. This year alone, close to 1 million people will enter this country legally and have their green card and go to work. But we do have a right, like every sovereign country does, to know who you are, why you're coming, what you've done in the past, and what we think you might or might not do in the future. We have a right. We have a right to make sure that you're not going to come to this country and pose a burden on our social safety network. All of these things are rights of sovereign countries. A bunch of sovereign countries in the world do it. Most of the countries in the world have far more restrictive immigration policies than the United States has ever had. But we are in a special period right now. This is not like business as usual. This is, right now, we are less than a year removed from the most reckless migratory incompetence in American history, where a flood of people and mass migration events entered the United States. And they can claim all they want that they vetted people. This is just not true. Some of them were cursory vetting, and in some cases you couldn't vet them, because the countries or places they came from had no documents upon which they could be vetted on. So that program will be studied, and it will not be restarted at the scale and scope it was until we are comfortable that it is one that we know everyone who's coming in and who they are and whether they meet the criteria for admission to the United States.
Do you have any sort of
timeline? Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. A follow-up on the conversation between President Trump and Maduro, because the day after the conversation, the president said he was going to be meeting that gentleman very soon. Is this still being considered? Is the president still considering that? Is still a chance for diplomacy on Venezuela? And also, any role that you see Brazil could play? Because just a few weeks ago, President Lula spoke with President Trump and Nicolás Maduro, and he offered to help to mediate the conversation.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on any, as I said, I'm not going to comment on the president's talks. I will just point you to the fact that the thing about this president that I think you've seen is he's willing to talk to anybody. He's willing. He doesn't view talks as a concession. But I don't have any update to you on what comes next in that regard. I have no reason to express skepticism or optimism about it. I'm just not going to comment on what the president has available to him as options across the range of options that include diplomatic options.
And how about the conversation with Lula?
I mean, I think he said to us what he has said publicly, and that he has a willing to play a positive role in that regard. You know, the president's had 2 phone conversations and 1 meeting with President Lula. I think we've made progress on some things, including on trade. We have more work to be done. The two presidents got along. We felt that was important in terms of those conversations. I've talked to Mauro, their foreign minister, on it, including this earlier this week. And we have a lot of issues in common with Brazil that we'd like to work together on, and strong links. Being from Florida, as an example, I know how important Brazil has been to us as a partner. We've had some disagreements on a couple things over the years as well. But I feel like that relationship is on a positive trajectory. But as far as its role in Venezuela, I don't have anything to provide you on that today of any specificity.
Just a quick
Yes, sir.
follow-up on the tariffs, political tariffs
No,
in
I got to
Brazil.
get to him.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you very much for doing this. On phase 2 in Gaza, when is the soonest that we could see that being implemented? And then separately, you said at the top that you want the US to play the role of mediator that brings about the avoidance of war and ending conflicts. How do you square that position with a possible military intervention in Venezuela? Thank you.
Well, first of all, a couple things. Wanting to pursue peace and secure peace does not necessarily come at the expense of your national interest. We reserve the right and retain the option of defending our national interest. Now, in the case, again, we're going to talk about Venezuela. Let's be clear. Maduro has made multiple deals with elements around the world, including with the Biden administration. Okay, Maduro made a deal with the Biden administration, and here's the deal he made. And I only say this to you not because we want to get back to that deal, but just as an example of why the guy cannot be trusted to keep deals. It's a problem. Okay, somebody breaks deals multiple times, you have a right to be skeptical they're ever going to keep the deal. He made a deal, and as part of that deal, they lifted sanctions. They released his two nephews from federal custody after their conviction. They sent back his bagman, Alex Saab, and all these sorts of things. He released political prisoners, and he promised to have free and fair elections. He didn't have free and fair elections. He rearrested or exiled most of those political prisoners, so he pocketed all the benefits and lived to none of those commitments. So, look, it's hard to have and do a deal with someone who never keeps a deal. Now, on the broader perspective of what you're asking about, let's be mature here. Yes, there are issues where we want to pursue peace if that is possible, but we also have our national interest. If our we're not going to reach a peace deal with narco-trafficking bans. We're not. We can't reach a peace deal with MS-13. We can't reach a peace deal with Tren de Aragua. We can't reach a peace deal with the ELN or the FARC that are still pumping drugs into the United States or any of their cartels in Mexico. You can't do a peace deal with these people any more than you could do a peace deal with a mafia. So I think it's important to understand that's different between warring factions and nation states around the world where we feel like maybe we could act as a bridge to bringing about the differences. But when you're talking about things that directly implicate the national interest of the United States, and no one can argue that transnational criminality and terrorism in our hemisphere is not a threat to the national interest of the United States, we have to we reserve the right and have the right to utilize every element of national power to defend the national interest of the United States. And no one can dispute that. And every country in the world reserves the same option. We just simply have more power than some of them do.
And phase 2 Gaza?
Oh, phase 2 Gaza, yeah. I mean, we got to complete phase 1 to get to phase 2. That's why we're working every day to get there. Look, guys, if this stuff was easy, it would have been done already a long time ago. This is a complex situation. No one would dispute it, but it's important. What we achieved already, what the president achieved ending that war already was something no one thought was possible. Everyone thought that the last episode was going to be an Israeli incursion into Gaza City that would lead to massive loss of life and the hostages would never be reunited with their families. And today, as we speak, all the hostages that were living are back, all but I believe one of the bodies has been returned. No one would have believed that 6 months ago. So that in and of itself, but that is not the end of the story. We want to continue on this. But what we're talking about is dealing with something that no one has been able to solve in 30 or 40 years. No one. And it's going to take some time. But I feel generally optimistic that we have the right people at the table with the right motivations to make it happen. But no one is claiming to you that this is going to be just a straight up trajectory. It's going to have its ups and downs. It's going to have its good days and bad days. The important point is that the momentum and the trajectory on it is a positive trajectory. And we're investing, high levels of our government every day in trying to make that happen. But we can't do it alone. We have all these other partners that we have to include. So I would focus you on, let's get the board of peace in place and announced. Let's get the technocratic Palestinian group in place. And then let's get the stabilization force in place. And then we can move on to the other elements, the phase 2 and phase 3 of the plan, that hopefully will be what will be enduring. And the work of putting phase 2 and phase 3 in place is going to extend far beyond the next 3 years. I mean, this is a generational commitment. But we want to leave those pieces in place for the next administration to continue to build upon, even as we achieve phase 1 and parts of phase 2 during this administration. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, some of your former Democratic former Senate colleagues who considered you one of their most trusted bipartisan partners have, since you joined the Trump administration, accused you of abandoning some of your former principles and positions. And 3 or 4 have said they regret voting for you.
Well, I had 99 votes. I could have spared 4.
What's your response to that? And more importantly, how do you think about building and maintaining bipartisan consensus and cooperation on foreign policy at this moment, especially because that will be necessary to sustain President Trump's legacy after he leaves office?
I mean, we live in a very different time, unfortunately. I engage with senators, for example, from both parties. We saw a bunch of them the other day all the time, and obviously, but politics today is very different than it was 10 or 20 years ago. It just is. I'm not in that anymore. I'm no longer in a political office, but I know political offices. I served 14 years in the Senate, and politics is real, right? I mean, there's also not a lot of benefit to a Democratic senator saying what a great guy Marco Rubio is in this current political environment, or anyone in the Trump administration for that matter. So all I will tell you is I get up every day, we go to work, we get work done, we do cooperate and work with. They don't always agree with everything we're doing, but I have a lot of people in the Senate, particularly chairmen of key committees that we interact with. There's things people can say and do in the public that because of politics and private that they can't say or do in public. But I don't know what else to comment on that other than one more point, and that is, I think this is important. I think people have lost sort of their mindset here a little bit, okay? The foreign policy, the State Department is not its own government, okay? The Secretary of State is not its own government. I'm appointed by the President, confirmed by the Senate, and then, or nominated by the President, confirmed by the Senate, and then appointed by the President. But at the end of the day, the person the people of the United States elected to be the President of the United States and the Commander-in-Chief is Donald J. Trump. That's who they elected. And my job, and the job of the people in our administration, is to implement the President's foreign policy. We provide advice, we provide counsel, but ultimately our job is to take what the President wants to do, take his vision, and implement it. Come up with options for implementing the President's vision. That's my job today. When I was a senator, I represented the state of Florida. Today, I am the Secretary of State for Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States, and my job is to implement the President's foreign policy, provide advice, provide counsel, provide ideas, provide for opportunities and ways in which his foreign policy can be implemented. But in the end, our job is to implement that. And why people think that somehow foreign policy can be divorced from our republic? That's not the way our Constitution works. The Constitution does not say you elect the President of the United States and then you put in place a State Department to undermine the President if the person who's the Secretary of State doesn't agree with him. That's ridiculous. That's stupid, really. And I don't know why anybody would think that. So that's the job I have, and that's the job I'm proud to do. I think we've made a lot of progress. We have a lot more work to do. All right, on our row right there from Italy, right? I know you from the...
Yes.
Do you cover us now, or are you on Capitol Hill still?
No. Everything.
So you're like a one-man bureau for the whole
well
thing.
As
All right.
here.
You're like me. You have 2 jobs. Good.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So the United States, on one hand, are mediating with Russia to end the war in Ukraine. But on the other hand, the Russian foreign minister yesterday or the day before said it would be a fatal mistake from the U.S. To block the oil tanks from Venezuela and trying to overthrow the Maduro regime. So, what kind of what's the assess that you're doing, and are there any safeguards in place to avoid escalation with Russia? And then I have another question about the Hezbollah, sir.
Yeah, we're not concerned about an escalation with Russia with regards to Venezuela. I mean, we've always expected them to provide rhetorical support for the Maduro regime. I think they have their hands full in Ukraine, and if he's watching, Sergei, Merry Christmas. And but at the end of the day, I expected them to say what they were going to say. The rhetorical support, we understand what that's at. It's not a factor in how we consider this whole thing.
And then, if I may, about the Hezbollah, I know you already answered, but I wanted to ask you if the U.S. administration is considering a broader military support involving also potential Arab partners, not only in providing weapons, but also going into the field to disarm the Hezbollah if the diplomatic talks will fail.
Well, I've not heard anyone sort of suggest that at the level of detail that you've talked about. I think regionally, for example, if you talk to the Syrian authorities, they're very concerned about Hezbollah. I think most of the countries in the Gulf region view Hezbollah as an agent of Iranian influence and Iranian action. But as far as what you're discussing, which is sort of a coalition of armed units going into Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah, I've not heard that proposed by anybody. Perhaps you have, but I haven't, and that's not certainly something we've been...
Senator Graham
okay.
was talking about this at the
my former
Congress.
colleagues, yeah. Well, you should ask Lindsey about how he's going to put that together, because, but we just haven't heard it. not saying you may not hear that one day in the future. But I think what is clear, and I think maybe perhaps what Lindsay is speaking to, is that it is clear that if you talk to leaders in the region in all these countries, they all have the same goal, perhaps not, which is to ensure that Hezbollah can no longer play the role that they've played in the past, not just threatening Israel, but being an agent, an open agent, really a proxy of Iranian influence in the region.
Thank you.
Next. I didn't get to you. Oh, I'm in the new row. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. You have previously said in the past that you and the administration are committed to fixing the backlog of visas for foreign-born priests and other religious workers, whether that be through the Religious Workforce Act, or through maybe a standalone process. Is there any update you can give on the status of that and what's being done to
I think we'll have more to
fix this
announce
issue?
on that early next month. Yeah, early next month.
Okay.
We've worked closely with a lot of the religious authorities to do that. Obviously, depending on the denomination, we're not discriminating in favor of one versus another.
Mhm.
Some denominations are more professionalized in terms of what they're able to provide us with and sort of information versus others. Some of it depends the country they're coming from, because, we have to be careful not to be waiving, we have country-specific requirements depending on the country they're coming from. But I think we have a good plan in place to put that into effect. And I know we've worked with a number of denominations in that process. Obviously, one of the big users of that system is the Catholic Church in the U.S., and so we've worked with the Conference of Bishops. And I think we're going to get to a good place. We don't have it ready yet. All this takes time to put together, but we're moving quickly, and I think we'll have something positive about that at some point next month, hopefully in the early part of next month.
Thank you
yes,
so much.
sir.
Thanks, Mr. Secretary. White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles said that the U.S. would need congressional approval to conduct ground strikes in Venezuela. Do you share that view? And on your response today on regime change, Wiles already acknowledged that the point of both strikes was to pressure Maduro, i.e. have him leave. Why not just acknowledge that this is a regime change?
Do you have the quote she said?
That this is
but do you have the quote?
To cry uncle.
Yeah, so cry uncle, all right? I guess in Spanish you would have to say tío. But I think, I don't know how that, you can interpret any way you want. But at the end of the day, it is clear that the current status quo with the Venezuelan regime is intolerable for the United States. The status quo, that they operate and cooperate with terrorist organizations against the national interests of the United States. Not just cooperate, but partner with and participate in activities that threaten the national interests of the United States. So yes, our goal is to change that dynamic. And that's why the president's doing what he's doing. Change that dynamic by ensuring that no one wants to get on drug boats anymore. People were just going out there, openly without any fear of the reaper. And now I think people understand, it's not a good idea. By the way, we haven't had a strike in the Caribbean Basin in almost 5 weeks. Do you know why? It's not because we stopped looking. It's because no one wants to get on a boat anymore and do that. So it's been effective at cutting that down. Now there's been strikes in the Pacific. So the bottom line is that, sure, our goal is to, what's the point of doing something? But the change, people want to focus on regime this and this and that. The goal here is very simple. The national interest of the United States. The President of the United States was elected to protect the American people, to protect America. That's what he was elected to do. It's one of his fundamental promises that Donald J. Trump made when he was elected President of the United States is, I am going to protect this country. Protect us from what? From the threat of terrorism, from threats to our economy, and from threats the drug organizations and the terrorist organizations pose against the United States. And if you are an ally, a friend, a partner, or cooperate or participate in activities that threaten the United States, you're going to have a problem with President Trump. I think the only shocking thing here is that a lot of people say that. People run all the time for office. I'm going to take on the cartels. I'm going to do this. He's actually doing it. He's not doing anything he didn't say he was not going to do during this campaign. He said he was going to go after the cartels. And now he's going after the cartels and everybody's shocked. Don't be shocked. This is a man who was elected president because he says and then he does. He doesn't just say and then forget about it.
In congressional approval on land strikes, do you think that the United States does need to go to Congress in order to conduct land strikes in Venezuela?
Well, look, I'm not going to speculate about things that haven't happened and may never happen. I'm not going to speculate on that. All I'm going to tell you is that two things. And I remind Congress all the time. By the way, I was very consistent on this position because it was my position when I was in the Senate. Number one, no administration, Republican or Democrat, has ever accepted the War Powers Act as being constitutional. That said, multiple administrations, including this one, have sought congressional approval and or certainly congressional notification of actions taken. Why? because American action is always strongest when it has the buy-in and the participation of a broad set of actors. Now, given our current political climate, that's not always easy, because we do have people today in politics that are against everything that President Trump is for. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if they themselves had the same position. If it's President Trump's idea, they're against it reflexively. Okay? That's the nature of the current climate in our politics. But I can tell you that to this point, nothing has happened that requires us to notify Congress or get congressional approval or cross the threshold into war. We have very strong legal opinions. We have now briefed Capitol Hill 23 times, 23 briefings, bipartisan briefings on Capitol Hill. I have personally participated in 6 of those 23 at the highest levels of the committee, but then the full House and then the full Senate, which, by the way, are always interesting. Now, okay, get it. I've been there before, okay? So I was part of this thing in the past as well. But you do this briefing, you answer all their questions, and then they go out and tell people, we heard nothing, we saw nothing, that we were pleased with. They already had their answer before they went in, but we do them anyways. And we continue to do them. Not to mention the individual calls I've had with leaders in Congress, and I'm not going to disclose what those are. So everybody over there knows what we're doing, they know why we're doing it, and we've kept Congress fully apprised, and we'll continue to do so. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The settlers' violence is rampant in the West Bank.
The what is, I'm sorry?
The settlers,
yes,
the Israeli settlers' violence in the West Bank is being escalating, is increasing. Also, Israel is building around 20 settlements unit. Doesn't this undermine your own effort in the peace process? And also, if I may, on Gaza, the humanitarian situation is dire. The babies have been frozen to death because of the weather. Tents have been flooded. Is this anything that the United States can do to alleviate the suffering of the civilians in Gaza?
Yeah. In the case of the West Bank, we have, and you've seen our embassy even has put out statements and comments about specific incidents there that we're concerned about, that we do think, create a point of strong friction in the broader effort. And our own embassy, and Ambassador Huckabee has spoken to this as recently as a couple weeks ago, very firmly, I believe. And so we'll continue to communicate that as we have and make our opinion known in regards to its impact on the broader challenges. In the case of humanitarian, absolutely. I mean, this is the reason why that group is set up there every single day. We've been successful at opening new corridors. We want to continue to see that increase. We want to continue to see the flow of aid increase into those parts of Gaza that are still under Hamas control. But it also goes back, not to sound like a broken record, to why it is so critical to have the border peace put in place and the Palestinian technocratic group put in place. Because that allows us now, when you have this technocratic Palestinian group in place, and a stabilization force to provide security, it now allows us to have someone we can work with to turn over the humanitarian aid to and have them be the ones that help distribute it along with these international partners. That's what the point we're trying to get to, that we can get to a point where that is, and part of the thing with humanitarian aid is also security. Someone has to provide security for these convoys as they go in, because oftentimes they have been attacked, they've been looted, they've been so forth. We don't have a force that can do that right now unless the Israelis are going to go in, and that would violate the ceasefire. But if we have a stabilization force on the ground, they could provide security. And then the technical side of it, the logistical side of it, along with the international partners, is what the Palestinian Technocratic Organization can do. That is why we are in such a hurry to finalize that phase of this deal so that the aid can flow. And not just aid, then we can move from aid to reconstruction, which is the goal everybody has. You want to reach a point in which you're not providing aid because Gaza has an economy, and it's not an economy controlled by Hamas. But we can't get to that stage until we can secure the place. And that's why we're in such a hurry to finalize that phase of the deal. Yes, sir.
Vladimir Putin today had
I thought you were introducing yourself. No. I'm Vladimir
Definitely not. Definitely not. Vladimir
so what
Putin.
What are you doing here?
Nick Schiffer in PBS NewsHour. Vladimir Putin had his own end-of-year press conference today.
Oh, he's trying to step on my message.
Yeah. His went, I think, 4 hours, so we got at least 3 hours. And he said he was willing to end the war in Ukraine.
I bet you he didn't do it in Spanish.
He did not.
All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. He said he was willing to end the war in Ukraine based on principles he had outlined last summer, and that included a complete Ukrainian withdrawal from 4 regions, most of which are not occupied by Russia, recognition of occupied Russian territory in Ukraine, and the complete lifting of sanctions. That goes beyond some of the recent conversations you've been having. So do you think Putin is serious about peace, and is the U.S. willing to recognize occupied Russian territory in Ukraine?
Look, I think ultimately there is what people say, and I'm not claiming that that's not his position. I'm just saying there's what people say and then what people do. In the end, we're not going to base our approach to finding peace here on the basis simply of what people are saying. We're going to base it on what people are willing to agree to, what countries are willing to agree to. Our role is very simple. We try to understand what the Russian position, how much can they give and what do they have to have. We understand the Ukrainian position, and we try to find whether those two things can overlap. Maybe that happens this week. Maybe that happens next month. Maybe that's not ready for a few months. That's not up to us. That's up to the two sides. In the end, it's up to them to make a deal. We can't force Ukraine to make a deal. We can't force Russia to make a deal. They have to want to make a deal. The role we're trying to play is a role of figuring out whether there's any overlap here that they can agree to. And that's what we've invested a lot of time and energy and continue to do so. That may not be possible. I hope it is. I hope it can get done this month before the end of the year. I want it to end as soon as possible. I know the president is deeply committed to helping it end. I know this, though. We're the only ones that can do it. If we were not involved, no one would be talking to both sides. The UN can't do it. But who else is going to do it? Nobody in Europe can do it. So I think I think the one thing people should have is an expression of gratitude that President Trump is willing to continue to engage in this despite the fact that we haven't yet gotten the outcome that he hopes to have, because no one else could do it. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So this whole narrative that we're trying to force something on Ukraine is silly. We can't there's no peace deal that Ukraine, there is no peace deal unless Ukraine agrees to it. But there's also no peace deal unless Russia agrees to it. We are just trying to find whether there's common ground that we can make happen. And maybe that's not possible. Maybe it is. Maybe that's not possible right now. But we don't think our work could potentially serve as a baseline for that in the future. Maybe it is possible now. We're going to continue to test it and see where we can get to.
Is the U.S. willing to recognize occupied territory?
I'm not going to speak on any specifics of any deal because we're not going to be able to negotiate a peace deal, especially one like this, in the media. Suffice it to say, let me just put it to you this way. There can't be a peace deal unless Ukraine agrees to it. And there can't be a peace deal, of course, unless Russia agrees to it. But remember that. Any peace deal is one that Ukraine has to agree to because they're a combatant. If Ukraine says we don't agree to it, there won't be peace. So our job is not to force anything on anyone. It is to try to figure out if we can nudge both sides to a common place. And guys, in a conflict like this, in a war like this, that's not easy. It takes a lot of time. We're going to have some patience with it, unfortunately. It's already gone longer. But understand why the president cares about this. Okay? Because let's be honest here, and I'm not trying to diminish this, okay? Because it's an interesting position to be in. The United States only provides, we don't provide weapons to Russia, we only provide weapons to Ukraine. The United States doesn't sanction Ukraine, it's only sanctioned Russia. And yet we are still the only country in the world that can talk to both sides. So let's be clear about the role we've played in this so far. I mean, we're the only ones that can. So I don't mean to be dismissive of why this matters or it's important, because this is going on in another continent. We've got issues in our own hemisphere we need to be dealing with. That if you were to ask prioritization, I would argue that something in our hemisphere from our national interest is more important than something in another continent. But it doesn't make Ukraine and Russia unimportant. We care about it. That's why we're involved in it. But by the same token, why does the president care? I'll tell you why. This week, 9,000 people will die, including like 5,000 or 6,000 weekly Russian casualties, okay, in a war. This is a bloody, nasty conflict. In the same time, the entire electric grid, the entire infrastructure of Ukraine is being destroyed almost as fast as it's being rebuilt. Every week that goes by, the cost of rebuilding that country gets exponentially higher. It is now becoming generational reconstruction. This is a very damaging war that's going to have incredible implications. There are now hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, probably maybe in millions, who have not lived in Ukraine in years. They've been displaced to other countries. The implications of this long term for Ukraine are dramatic. And for Russia too, but for Ukraine, and we're focused on them. This is why the president wants to end it. He thinks it's a bloody, nasty, horrifying war, and he doesn't like wars. He really doesn't like wars. He thinks they're a waste of money, time, and talent. And he wants this one to end. And we're doing everything we can to end it. And it may or may not be possible, but we're certainly going to keep trying. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I promise you we're going to go through here. Do you have a deadline or something? I know, but let me get to the roads, because if I break up the road thing, you're going to screw up the whole plan I have for today. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Secretary. If I can turn internally for a moment, a recent survey by the American Foreign Service Association found strikingly low morale among career diplomats in the U.S., some of whom reported that they feel like they can't freely express their opinions, that their candidate input is not welcome, and many of them are saying that they're actually thinking about career changes. I know you talked at the top about how change can be disruptive, but I wonder, how much does this concern you? Do you possibly see this as a feature, not a bug, or would you be happy to see people leave so that you can bring in a new crop of people? And then just briefly on your own role, you have 2 jobs right now. Your travel schedule seems a bit lighter than your recent predecessors. You didn't attend the last NATO foreign ministers gathering and had your deputy go. Are you fully performing the job of Secretary of State? Are you more of a national security advisor than a Secretary of State? Can you talk about that?
Well, first of all, on the travel schedule, we have a lot of leaders keep coming here, too. So you talk about NATO, great example on NATO. I already went to a NATO meeting this year of all the foreign ministers. Then I went to the leaders meeting, which not all the foreign ministers were at. And then on top of that, that week is the week we had Rwanda and the DRC coming to the United States on a deal that I was working in. So as far as the travel schedule is concerned, we have a lot of leaders constantly coming here. We have leader meetings every single week for the most part up until last week. So there's a lot of work to be done. On the Foreign Service, we have very talented people here. I saw that report somewhere. That's from the union. It's from a union survey. All I can tell you is that today Foreign Service officers are more empowered at the regional bureau than they've ever been. I get descent cables. I get cables every day from all over the world that provide the baseline for a lot of the ideas that we pursue. There isn't a week that goes by that I don't send back 2 or 3 cables with notes about, let's turn this into a policy proposal. We are changing this place so that it is our missions in the field that are not just driving directives from the top down, but also ideas from the bottom up. And I'm very proud of that, and I think that's going to lead and pay huge dividends for future secretaries of state long after I'm gone. So, yes, sir.
Thank you, Secretary. Human rights organizations report that 2025 has seen the highest number of executions in the Islamic Republic of Iran in over 2 decades. What specific new measures is the State Department taking to ensure that human rights abuses, specifically this surge of state-sanctioned execution, do not become a secondary priority in your dealings with Tehran?
Well, ultimately, look, we have very deep and systemic disagreements with the regime in Iran. And it's part of if not the most sanctioned country in the world, one of the most sanctioned countries in the world. There isn't a week that goes by, or at least 2-3 times a month, I'm authorizing some new sanction on some new entity related to Iran. I don't think anyone could argue that this administration has been friendly towards them. So we continue to feature these things because it tells us about who they are. In the case of some of these executions that you're talking about, some of them, by the way, were in the aftermath of the war with Israel, where they went through and have jailed people and accused people of being informants and spies and things of that nature. But we're under no illusion, and every year we put out a report that outlines this, and we've been pretty consistent in our messaging. Our problem with the Iranian regime isn't simply, obviously it's predominantly their desire to acquire nuclear weapons, their sponsorship of terrorism, but it's ultimately the treatment of their own people. I said it in my hearing a year ago in the Senate, I say it now, I know of no nation on earth where there is such a difference between a regime that governs the country and the people who live there every single day. That regime is not reflective of the people who live in Iran, who are the inheritors of a proud and long cultural legacy and a proud history. And then you've got a clerical radical regime that has driven and taken the wealth of that country and used it not to enrich secure their people and their future, not to make sure they have enough water and electricity. They've used their money to sponsor terrorist organizations all over the world. That's what they've used their money for. So we're going to continue to consistently point that out.
Secretary, second
I'm sorry, I got to go because I'm getting everybody today.
Regarding Europe, you said that Europe was not going to be able to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. There's been some disengagement. There's some push within the European Union to either not comply with the increase in defense spending that the United States has been promoting, or also some European countries like Spain promoting closer ties to China, or going to China, or inviting more investment from China, or even Chinese technology in critical infrastructure. Are you concerned at all about this path?
No, the countries made a commitment in NATO at a meeting I was at, where they made the 5% pledge, which is a dramatic and historic pledge, with the exception of Spain, of course, who didn't make that pledge. And we've had no indication from any of the countries that agreed to that they're not going to do it, because it's in their own interest. It's in their own interest. Bottom line is, increasing their defense capacity is in their interest, because it's their defense. As far as opening up to China, look, one of the biggest problems Europe faces is they're being flooded with cheap Chinese goods, including Chinese cars. They're being flooded. Their own industrial base is under attack by unfair Chinese practices economically. So, I don't know about the rhetoric you're pointing to or the examples, but that's a threat that Europe faces, and they need a rebalancing as well. They're also, like we are,
experiencing disruptions to supply chains and things at the economic realm that are very problematic and dangerous for national security. So we would expect them to act at their national interests, both continentally and individually as their own countries. All right, we got to speed it up. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Annalise Nielsen from Sky News Australia. In your national security strategy, you've warned Europe about civilizational erasure. When you've been watching what's been happening in Australia with the rise of anti-Semitism and our government's response to the Bondi massacre, our Prime Minister's dodged direct questions on Islamic extremism, but then unprompted evoked right-wing extremism as a threat. Do you have any message to Australia about civilizational erasure, and why is America watching?
Look, I just think it's very simple, and that is that any mass migration is highly disruptive to any country. We talked about it here in the United States. When you experience mass migration, I don't talk about immigration, I'm talking about mass migration. Okay, mass migration is a negative thing. It's not positive. And it's very difficult for any society to absorb and assume hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people over a short period of time, especially if they come from halfway around the world. There are cultural and assimilations issues related to that, et cetera. And so these are concerns that it's concerns I have about our own country primarily. It's been a priority of this administration to address this. But I think it's a growing concern in Europe. I mean, there are other voices in Europe and obviously in Australia as well that have expressed concern about this. These are facts. This doesn't make you anti-anybody. What it makes is you do have, as a sovereign country, the right to control how many people you absorb, how many people you allow in, and who those people are. This is a very basic sovereign right. Okay? It doesn't mean you don't allow any people in. There are people coming into this country every day to visit, to work, to live permanently, but you have to know who they are, and you have to have some limits and controls over what those numbers are. And obviously, because of some of the things we've seen, mass migration over the last decade has been highly disruptive, not just to the United States, but also to continental Europe, and in some cases in the Indo-Pacific as well. So I just think this is a real challenge that multiple Western advanced industrialized countries are facing, and I think it's pronounced in parts of Europe as well, and obviously, at least on the basis of your question, appear to be a challenge as well in Australia. All right, to the next row. Yes, ma'am. Hold on, Andrew, right behind you. I'm going to get to everybody. Go. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask.
You don't have a question? Okay, no, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
On Ukraine this weekend, the meetings with the Ukrainian delegation and the U.S. delegation, are you planning to participate
It's
in
in
those
Miami.
meetings?
They're starting today and tomorrow. I may be there tomorrow for a portion of it. There's another one happening today, but that one is with the Turks and the Qataris and the UAE on the Gaza plan. So if I'm not there, because I have things we have to do here today, like talk to you guys, I think tomorrow, since it's in Miami as well. So, yeah, go ahead. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Timothy Onorezi with the Washington Examiner. Going back to the previous question about Europe, and I believe the Sky News reporter referenced civilizational erasure, which is a term that has been used by both the White House and the State Department. Both the White House and the State Department have made kind of recurring overtures to Europe as a civilization that is in some sort of danger and that should join with the United States as a sort of Western civilizational bloc. And it seems to be a recurring priority. However, with the release of the national security strategy, many European leaders, leader of Germany, members of the EU, of the European Parliament, have found it totally unacceptable or offensive or question the allyship of the United States with the rhetoric that was used. So I just wonder if the United States is correct in that these policies, like mass migration, will lead to civilizational erasure. Is it possible to save European civilization if the governments simply don't want to be saved?
How has this alliance long been described? As the Western alliance, right? What is it that, and it's not just me saying, you go to these NATO meetings, you meet with people, what they will tell you is our shared history, our shared legacy, our shared values, our shared priorities. That's what they talk about as the reason for this alliance. Well, if you erase your shared history, your shared culture, your shared ideology, your shared priorities, your shared principles, then you just have a straight up defense agreement. That's all you have. So what I'm trying to point to, and what we've tried to point to, is very simple. That is, at the bedrock and at the cornerstone of our relationship, for example, with Europe, is the fact that we do have a shared culture, a shared civilization, a shared experience, and shared values and principles on things like human rights, on freedom, on liberty, on democracy, on all sorts of on the rights of the individual, all these sorts of things that we in this nation are the inheritors of in many cases, because many of these ideas that led to the founding of our country found their genesis in some of these places in the Western Alliance. If you take that away, if that's wiped out because for whatever reason it's no longer a priority, I do think it puts a strain and threatens the alliance in the long term and in the big picture. Now, whatever internal politics causes people to dispute this, I'm not going to comment on, other than to tell you that I do think that at the core of these special relationships we have,
is the fact that we have shared history, shared values, shared civilizational principles that we should be unapologetic about. This is a nation that was founded on Western principles, like liberty, the value of and the right of the individual, the right of self-governance. These are all Western values. Now, others may have adopted it in different parts of the world, but they emanate from Western history. And it's something that we should be unapologetic about. Why would we be apologetic about it? Anyone who doesn't recognize, for example, that many of the features of our system of government find their root in Roman and Greek history is a fool. Is a fool. It's just not true. And so I think that we need to understand and embrace that, not negate it. And I think that's what we're pointing to here, is that we are concerned that particularly in parts of Western Europe, those things that underpin our alliance and our tie to them could be under threat in the long term. And by the way, there are leaders in those countries that recognize that as well. Some say it openly, some say it privately. In the eastern and southern part of Europe, they're much more open about it. Nonetheless, it is a factor that needs to be addressed. Yes, ma'am.
Was it the New York Post? So you said earlier that you don't see a surrender happening anytime soon when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. Putin says he will accept nothing less than an unconditional surrender, but if this latest intensive push for peace talks fails, is there anything that the U.S. can do to make Russia want to end its war? And then secondly, some of the most major foreign policy issues from Venezuela, Iran, Ukraine, Israel, have been assigned special envoys who do not report directly to the State Department, which obviously has a larger view of how these conflicts affect each other. How intimately has State been involved with these envoys' strategies and actions this year? And do you see State taking a larger role in these kind of day-to-day negotiations?
I disagree with the premise of your question. I mean, every envoy that's been involved in all these critical issues, I personally work with very closely. I talk to them 4 or 5 times a day, or meet with them, or they're in the White House, or they're here, primarily in the White House, or they're involved in the same meetings we're involved in. I mean, that's just not factual. No one is out there doing independent action. All of it is strongly coordinated. It's one of the benefits of also being the National Security Advisor, is it allows us to also organize the interagency. Every single one of these envoys, I speak about Steve Woodcock in particular, who's a phenomenal person, very smart, very talented, who dedicates, he doesn't get paid to do this job, he does it for free. And he invests a tremendous amount of time, full time on this thing, traveling all over the world, doing all kinds of things. Okay, but Steve doesn't do anything independently. He relies on the interagency. He gets support from Treasury, sometimes from Commerce, certainly from the Department of War, and from the State Department. In fact, he's staffed in many of these visits by State Department folks, and including the ones in Miami. Especially as we get to the technical parts of these agreements. So the synergy there is very tight across the board. And so I think that's just not factual.
I was referring to Envoy Grinnell with Venezuela and some of those conflicts earlier this year that really kind of weren't helpful in getting towards the release of the prisoners.
Look, everything that's been done in this administration has been coordinated in some form or fashion. Now, I mean, you guys don't see it all because I know everybody wants foreign policy to be 100% transparent, but sometimes it really can't be because there are sensitivities, because there are diplomatic sensitivities, because things people are willing to agree to in private, they may not be willing to do so in public. There's all kinds of things that have to happen in order to achieve outcomes. Sometimes they work, sometimes certain approaches work, sometimes they don't. But that's not new to this administration. That's been true throughout history. And but at the end of the day, I mean, I feel like we have a very good team of people that work very closely together on all of this. And the key is every single one of these conflicts, every single one of these issues are all multidisciplinary. Okay? There is no such thing as any one of these things that we're dealing with. Again, going back to the case, let's just use Ukraine as an example. In the case of Ukraine, it involved Treasury with regards to the minerals deal. It involves Commerce to some extent. It most certainly involves the Department of War in terms of not just battlefield assessments, but the sale of weaponry through Pearl, etc. It involves the Department of State in terms of everything from interpreters to the technical work of actually putting words to paper that would make sense in an agreement and supporting these visits. We had a very important meeting in Geneva, hosted at our embassy, supported by diplomatic personnel that were involved in doing that, and a lot of the follow-up as well that has to happen with some of these things. You know, peace deals aren't just, in the case of Gaza, strongly supported. We took our ambassador in Yemen, who can't be in Yemen, Fagan, and assigned him for 8 weeks on that portfolio so that we could have someone there to help navigate and coordinate all the technical aspects. You can reach a peace agreement in concept, but then someone's got to sit down and write down the technical language and the specificity, and they rely on the professionals in this department and other government agencies, depending on the subject matter. So, look, I think in any new administration, there's a learning curve early on. People are still getting onboarded. You may not even have people Senate confirmed yet in these positions. Maybe you haven't even hired some unfilled spots. But I think certainly in the second half of last year, I'm very proud and very pleased at the synergy that we've established on all of these things and that continue to establish it. Another one that's doing a great job is Mossad Boulos. I mean, he's out there every day working with our Africa Bureau. They're very involved in this, on trying to deal with Sudan, on trying to deal with the Rwanda DRC. So we have a good team of people that work very well together and very collaboratively, and we're going to build on that in the new year. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. Shelby Talcott with Semaphore. Vanity Fair quoted you as wondering whether Putin just wants the entirety of Ukraine. I'm curious if that's still a question for you, and how confident are you in being able to reach a peace agreement if that is a question? And then along those lines, is there a deadline for Russia and Ukraine to come to an agreement before this administration walks away?
Yeah, I'm not in any position to give you deadlines on anything. And as far as that quote, that's a quote the president has said publicly, which is he has said three things. I thought it was going to be the easiest one, and it's turned out to be the hardest. I don't know if Putin wants to do a deal or if Putin wants to take the whole country. These are things he has said openly. And, I think that's, I don't even remember when I talked to the guy from that magazine, but, for much of the early part of this year, one of the things we were trying to deduce is exactly what is it that Russia wants to achieve. We know what they wanted to achieve initially when the war began. They haven't achieved those objectives. There's a new set of objectives now. I mean, part of reaching an agreement is trying to understand, I've already said this, what both sides want or need and what they're willing to give. And so I think that was a question that many in the administration had early on, is defining what the Russian position, what exactly do they really, not what they say they publicly want, but what they publicly want and privately want are the same thing. That's part of the, and the same is true on the Ukrainian side, by the way. What could they actually live with, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, what are their red lines? That's how you put a deal together. You have to sort of figure out if the two sides overlap at some point. Sometimes some deals are just not ready. Sometimes the timing is perfect. You have to put it together. If you look at what happened with Gaza, that looked intractable. And then a series of events occurred that made it possible. For example, the strike inside of Qatar that the Israelis took at the time, was a sort of a dramatic thing. But in some ways, it sort of set in motion a sense of urgency to bring this thing to an end before it spread. So sometimes you just have to be ready for a change in circumstances or conditions that allow progress to be made. But these things are hard to do. They take a lot of time. Sometimes it takes some patience. It's just unfortunate that that every day that goes by, more people are died and more people die and more things are destroyed. Yes, sir.
To come back to your comments earlier on Sudan, you mentioned this concern about transshipment and weapons coming from overseas to Sudan. Could you sort of put a slightly finer point on it? Have you raised this with the UAE in your meetings that they need to stop providing support to the RSF? And have you got any commitment or any kind of
look, none of these, neither side has their own factories for the most part, right? All these weapons are acquired from abroad. They have to come from somewhere else, and they have to come through somewhere else. So someone is allowing it to be shipped in, and someone is actually shipping it. So we've had the right and appropriate conversations with all sides of this conflict, because that is their leverage. Without their support, neither side can continue. So that's why we need to engage, and that's why we've engaged the parties involved in all of this. I don't want to find myself here in a position of picking on anybody other than to say that we think and we're hopeful that we can make some progress on this, but we know that in order to make progress on this, it will require outside actors to use their leverage and their pressure to make that come about, particularly this humanitarian truce, which is the first thing we want to achieve. We think that outside actors have the leverage and the influence over the players on the ground to bring about this humanitarian truce. And we are very focused on it. I had a conversation on it yesterday. We have spoken to the UAE, we've spoken to Saudi, we've spoken to Egypt, and this is not new. We've been talking to them. We signed a document with them in September at the UN gatherings. We had previous meetings with them before that. So this is not a new engagement. It's just one that's had a higher sense of urgency given recent events there. But yeah, we're involved every single day trying to work through this because we do understand that and this is not new to this conflict. It is in many ways similar to what happened to happen in Gaza. What brought Hamas to the table, among other things, was the fact that some of the countries that had relationships with Hamas, like Qatar, like Turkey, played a very constructive role in bringing them to the table and pressuring them to sign an agreement. And we played a similar role on the other side. So, it's not unusual that you would involve outside actors in using leverage to bring parties to the table to agree on something. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. On Venezuela, what is the U.S. willing to commit if Maduro is ousted from power to ensure that the country doesn't plunge further into instability in sort of
Yeah, I don't have any announcements on that right now.
And do you see Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez as the heir apparents for power?
But we don't believe Maduro's not legitimate. We've been pretty clear. We didn't recognize him as a legitimate president. The previous administration didn't as well. The first Trump administration didn't either. He's not the legitimately elected president. They had an election last year that was stolen, and everyone knows it. Even all the countries in the region know it. And but I don't really have anything to add other than what I've said today with regards to Venezuela.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for doing this. According to a poll by the Reagan Institute, 62% of all Americans support the use of military force against suspected drug traffickers in the Caribbean. And among MAGA Republicans, 90% support the military use against suspected drug traffickers in the Caribbean. So how does the State Department view or analyze these figures?
Yeah, I mean, we don't do foreign policy by poll, and our job is to carry out the directives of the president. The president was elected. Donald J. Trump was elected the President of the United States, and he promised that if elected, he would go after drug cartels, and that's what he's doing. He is keeping a promise he made to the American people upon which they elected him to be president. He told them he would protect this country, and that's what he's doing, and he told them he would go after drug cartels, and that's what he's doing. So it doesn't surprise me if that poll is accurate, because the president's simply living up to the promises that he made when he ran for office. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Secretary, on Gaza, you've said repeatedly in this room now that this is a process, that phase 2 could take next 2 to 3 years. Is there a possibility
to fully implement? You can't build buildings in one day. Right?
Is there a possibility in your mind that the status quo, more or less as we see it now, with this sort of insufficient flow of aid, periodic violations of the ceasefire by each side, a lack of reconstruction, and of course the absence of an international security force, that this could potentially continue more or less through the rest of the president's term? And if not, I'm not asking for a date, but I think we'd all like to know. We've heard from the president and yourself that there are all these countries that want to join the international security force. When will they deploy? Are we talking in the next year, in the next couple of years? And is there a certain amount of time that could pass at which point the administration, without an ISF, at which point the administration would green light or will green light Israel to resume its war?
The way to answer that question is this way. No one is arguing that the status quo is sustainable in the long term nor desirable. And that's why we have a sense of urgency about bringing phase 1 to its full completion, which is the establishment of the border peace and the Palestinian Technocratic Authority or organization that's going to be on the ground. And then the stabilization force comes closely thereafter. Once we've established that, we have a lot of confidence that we are going to have the donors for the reconstruction effort and for all the humanitarian support in the long-term building of phases 2 and phases 3. We just don't think that we're going to get to phase 2 or phase 3. We don't believe that we can have a successful donor conference, just as a real example, until people know they want to know who's in charge, and they want to know that there's security. Okay, they want to make sure that who's going to pledge billions of dollars to build things that are going to get blown up again because a war starts. So they want to know who's in charge, and they want to know that there's security, and that there'll be long-term stability. So no one would argue that what we have in place now is sustainable in the long term. We have to get to the completion of phase 1. I am confident we will, within the time frame necessary to make it successful. It's just not today, but hopefully very, very soon. We've made real progress. We made progress as late as yesterday in additional names for this Palestinian organization that's going to be the technocratic organization. So I think we're very close. I think we're going to get there. I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to get through phase 1. And then what I meant about taking years for phase 2 or phase 3 is not years to start it. I'm just being, to rebuild a place, to put buildings and rebuild an economy, it takes time. You'll have the donors, but you still have to have the equipment. You got to build. You have to do all that sort of thing. This is a long-term project. Phase 1 is not a long-term project. It has to happen. I'm confident it'll happen within a time frame that makes it successful. We're very committed to it, and so is everybody else. Everybody else in the region understands that there is no plan B. If this doesn't work, plan B or what's going to happen is a new war, and no one wants that. No one wants that.
So, Mr. Secretary, are you going to be able to tell us in the next year who is going to secure Gaza and
it'll have to happen
who is
much.
going
You're
to
talking about the
disarm?
stabilization force?
Yes.
Yeah. That'll have to happen much more than a year from now. That is the completion of phase one. When we get through the establishment of the stabilization force, border peace, Palestinian group, stabilization force. All those things happen, boom, 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 1, 2, 3. They have to happen very quickly, not a year from now. This is something we're aiming at very soon. It has to. It's what we're focused on right now, like a laser. All right, yes, sir.
Secretary, thanks for all the time. And
it's not going to be 4 hours, I promise. It's an hour and a half.
You see the press corps is hungry for engagement here. I hope the State Department will return to regular press briefings soon. You got a great spokesperson's unit over there that's more than capable of handling it. A couple quick questions. The President directed you through executive order to explore sanctions of sectors and chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood. Qatar is ground zero for the Muslim Brotherhood. This administration obviously has a very close relationship with the Qataris. How do you confront the Muslim Brotherhood without confronting the Qataris? That's my first question. Second question is on UNRWA. There's a report that the State Department is in deep discussions about possibly sanctioning UNRWA. What's your mindset on that, and do you feel there is any role for UNRWA absent humanitarian aid delivery in the future?
I think we can deliver humanitarian aid without UNRWA. I think UNRWA is a corrupted organization that's unsalvageable, period. And I think our policies reflect that. On the first point that you talked about, I think we'll have some announcements, and not today, early next week, on Muslim Brotherhood. Designating groups there's a series of internal steps, despite what people may or may not perceive. There are things we have to meet, criteria we have to meet, information we have to have, boxes we have to check, legal reviews that have to happen, and that takes time. So, but I think there'll be announcements very soon on that. Probably as early, if not today, early this next week.
Do you expect pushback from the Qataris?
Well, I'm not going to comment on which segments of the Muslim Brotherhood. As you know, there are different chapters, for lack of a better term, and individuals spread throughout the world. But the President's issued his executive order, and we're working through the execution of it. And we'll get to what we need to get to. A lot of this obviously depends, from a legal review standpoint. You have to have certain information that you can cite in order to justify the designation. So we're working through that. We'll have some announcements next week, and they won't be the last announcements that we have. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, thank you for doing this today. This conversation between my colleagues and yourself paints a seemingly chaotic and hostile world at times. So very simply and generally put, what do you believe is the biggest threat facing the United States today?
I don't know we live in a world where we have a single threat that we can identify. I think there are multiple things that you look, both short-term and long-term. As I pointed to in the hemisphere, in our own hemisphere, closest to home geographically, it's the rise of and the power of transnational criminal terrorist group who are destabilizing nation states throughout the region and pose a direct threat to the United States through overthrowing governments, destabilizing these governments, leading to mass migration, and certainly the trafficking of drugs, and also providing fertile ground for potential, outside of hemisphere actors to act within our hemisphere in the long term. That's a major threat. I think we face some challenges. And we know the United States industrial base, the United States supply chains become dangerously dependent on other countries for many of the things that are elemental and critical to not just sustaining what we have, but building the economy of the 21st century. And so building up our industrial base and diversifying our supply chains are a critical threat that the United States needs to confront. I think related to that, not directly related to the Department of State, but somewhat related to the United States, is building up our defense industrial base as well. One of the challenges that we face, and so does much of the world, certainly in the West, is the ability to build weaponry at a scale and scope necessary, not just to deal with the threats of today, but to innovate and develop those tomorrow. It simply just takes too long to build up defense articles, get them to market in a timely fashion. And not only do we complain about that, but we have allies who want to buy things from us that we just haven't been able to produce fast enough. And so the President's made that a priority to confront. I think beyond that, I think you would argue that in the big picture, long term, we have to understand that the United States has interests in every part of the world that are related to these two threats. In the case of Africa, we see countries that have extraordinary opportunity to develop economically, the youngest population in the world, and the United States wants to have relationships, both commercial and personal, with many of these nations as they emerge in their own right into an era of prosperity. We want to be there to help assist in that if possible. We want to make sure that American interests are taken into account. Unfortunately, there are many countries around the world that in the past have had to rely on predatory practices of other countries to receive stability, to receive funds necessary to build infrastructure or what have you. We want to make sure that American businesses are at the table offering alternatives, be it in telecommunication, be it in artificial intelligence and technology, be it in basic infrastructure. So there's a lot of things to uncover and unpack, and I think in the long term as well. And I think our national security strategy reflects a lot of this. So I wish we lived in a world where we had one major threat. Many of these are interrelated. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I was going to ask my questions in Calibri, but since you do not
Wow.
communicate that
I
in that
speak Times New
anymore,
Roman.
I
So.
am. I'm going to ask in Times New Roman instead. Sorry about the Dolphins.
That's all right.
I know that you don't want to predict anything, but whether you're at these meetings in Miami, obviously not today, but maybe tomorrow, do you think there's any chance of having some kind of announceable progress before New Year? In other words, are we going to be working on New Year's Eve?
We might be, if it's necessary and productive. You know, we're going to work as long as it takes.
Okay.
And by the way, these are the meetings you know about, but there's talks going on every single day. There was a meeting earlier this week in Berlin. There's phone calls every day. There's phone calls every day, be it with my counterparts that are national security advisors, or my counterparts that are foreign ministers, or what Steve is engaged in, or what Jared's been engaged in, or what even at the diplomatic level, there are days where it's Matt Whitaker, our ambassador to NATO, that's involved in a conversation, or one of our ambassadors, the ones in the nation states that are relaying back a conversation or involved in one. So there's work happening every day, all the time, probably around the clock. Not just on Ukraine, but on all these other things.
Okay. And then
But these are the meetings you know about, and everybody kind of focuses on them as big events, but there's work happening all the time that lead up to those meetings and follow those meetings. As far as predicting a timeline, look, I'm not going to do that. This is a difficult task. It's an important one. We're focused on it. We want to get there as soon as possible.
Okay. So, and then obviously Gaza and Ukraine are still works in progress, but of the peace agreements that have been reached so far, two of them are in obvious trouble, right? You know, obviously which ones they are: Cambodia, Thailand, DRC, Rwanda. In retrospect, and I know that work is being done to try and resuscitate these, but in retrospect, do you think that the administration, the president, but also others, declared victory on these too early?
I mean, this fighting, for example, with Thailand and Cambodia did stop. Both sides have made commitments in writing that they signed. Those commitments today are not being kept as a result of both sides claim grievances against one another. And so the work now is to bring them back to the table. The ASEAN ministers will be meeting on Monday. I had a call yesterday with my Thai counterpart and intend to do the same, and we've been involved, the president, in conversations this weekend. And our hope is between now and Monday to work to bring everybody back to compliance with the agreements that were made. In the case of the DRC and Rwanda, we have signed commitments from both sides. Those commitments are not being met. But at least we have the signed commitments. We now can hold people to something, and we can push them. And in that case, by the way, for example, in the case of Rwanda DRC, as a good example, not only have we been engaged, but we have asked our friends on the Hill, both Republicans and Democrats, to also engage in conversations of their own with these leaders so they understand this is a bipartisan, multi-branch of government interest in this topic. But the good news about both of those is we have signed agreements. At least we have something we can push them towards compliance on. But as I said, in many of these cases with peace, you sign a peace deal, there's compliance, something happens, they fall out of compliance, you got to bring them back, you got to try to push. But at least instead of negotiating something new, you're simply trying to now push people back to compliance with what they already agreed on. So I think these were achievements. In the case of Cambodia and Thailand, it actually did stop fighting. It has now restarted, and we are working hard to push everybody back to compliance. And we are cautiously optimistic that we can get there by Monday or Tuesday of next week. We're hopeful. But there's more work to be done to that point. All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, you've said, including here today, that Maduro doesn't honor deals. How can the U.S. achieve the goal that you're describing of stopping the drug traffickers and the terrorists without Maduro leaving, number one? And number two, a topic that hasn't been asked about yet, State Department officials have recently met with visiting AFD officials from Germany, and we're hearing from AFD members as well as analysts who see the national security strategy as an effort by the administration to endorse the AFD. Can you share anything about the views of your views or the views of the administration on the AFD in Germany?
Yeah, I mean, on the case of Venezuela, I mean, I've answered it repeatedly now. I can only tell you our national interest is ending the flow of drugs towards the United States and these terrorist activities that are occurring that include cooperation with these gangs. Beyond that, I'm not going to speculate on what leads us to that outcome, other than to say that we're very committed to reaching that outcome. We meet with a broad array of political actors in multiple countries all over the world. They come, they visit the United States. We want to know who they are. We want to meet with them. We want to hear them out. As I told you, we have a president who generally does not view meeting anyone as a concession. So there are broad political actors. We've met with broad political actors from different parts of the Western Hemisphere as well, and broad political actors from different parts of the world. So I think it's important, and part of our job is to understand the full political spectrum of countries around the world, including countries we have alliances with. I would say that many of our allied countries, they meet with Democrats and Republicans, and sometimes libertarians or whoever. I mean, who are political figures that travel overseas, they also have meetings with them. So part of the job of the State Department is to inform the administration about sort of the internal political dynamics of the countries that we have alliances and partnerships with. Because in the end, we don't know what the outcomes of elections are, but understanding that the internal political climate of individual countries is a key part of determining how we approach and pursue public policy in partnership with them. And that's why, we've had recent elections here in the Western Hemisphere, and we've met with multiple people that are running. Meeting with them does not mean we're endorsing them for president of Bolivia or president of Chile, but we do want to know who these people are and what they're about and what they're thinking, because it informs our work. And by the way, so, we do that from the embassy as well. I mean, we get a lot of the cables I have is a meeting they met with someone who's going to run for president in 2 years. That doesn't mean we're endorsing the person, but we should probably know a little bit about them in case they win. And even if they don't win, if their party has votes in the parliament or votes in their legislative branch, that's an important factor to consider. Yes.
Thank you. Some key European and regional allies say they're limiting intelligence sharing with the United States because they're worried that the boat strikes violate international law and they don't want to be involved. Doesn't that strain these relations with key partners that you say you need in order to do these broader security efforts in the region?
No, it doesn't. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm not going to comment on intelligence matters. Look, every day I read stuff that's just not true. Every day. I'm not telling you guys are being, but you guys are being lied to sometimes. Like, sources will come to you and tell you things. Just because they have a government email doesn't mean that they know what they're saying. Maybe they just want to sound important. Maybe they have other incentives. I'm not opining about your question in particular. I'm just writ large, but I'm not going to talk about intelligence matters. Suffice it to say that the United States, every boat strike we've conducted, okay, this is not people seeing a boat and say, okay, let the drummer get wicked and blow him up. We're not talking about that stuff. We are presenting every single one of these is justified. We know who's on those boats. We've been tracking them from the very beginning. We know everything about them. Okay, there are boat strikes we don't take because they don't meet the criteria, the legal criteria. We have everything we need, and it's one of the reasons why you've seen this massive deployment in the region, is to be able to gather intelligence and paint a picture that we can justify to lawyers based on the law. So I'm very confident about that effort. It's been very successful.
Thank you, sir. Back to terrorist designations. Last month, the State Department designated 4 European groups aligned with Antifa as foreign terrorist organizations. Could we see more designations like that in the works for left-wing extremist groups, and what could the scope
I mean,
of
if
that
the
look
groups
like?
involved in firebombing, if there's anybody involved in activities such as that could potentially inspire or lead to violence in the United States, we're going to designate them. So sure, if you have any we want to suggest, I will look at them. Okay, here you go. I told you we'd get to you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience. Mr. Secretary, I wanted to drill down on the way you and the administration see America's national interests, because you said that Ukraine is not on our continent, not our war. You said something in our own hemisphere is more important. So this involves both our commitment to the negotiations in Ukraine, which the President is passionately committed to, for ending the rising numbers of deaths, he says. Russian President Putin told my colleague, Keir Simmons, today at the news conference in Moscow, we do not consider ourselves responsible for the loss of life because it was not us who started this war. Does the administration, does the President, you, the administration, believe that Putin was not the aggressor here? And if so, how can you reach an agreement between two parties when the aggressor will not acknowledge that he invaded a sovereign country? Let me, if I just may follow. So how do you reach any kind of compromise or ceasefire when Vladimir Putin repeatedly says And you say that may not be what he really believes, but he has never said that he would make concessions publicly. And he's never said that he invaded Ukraine. He's always said that that is Russian territory. So why is that not in our national interest? When also in our hemisphere, if it's impossible to eliminate the threat of narco-terrorism as you describe it, with Maduro in charge, you've described the extent beyond narco-terrorism and drug trafficking of his threat. You've described it today as a threat to the region. Doesn't that mean there will have to be regime change? And is it in America's national interest to get involved in regime change in our hemisphere, given what's happened before? And why is Maduro this overriding, I mean, he is an overriding threat by all acknowledgement, but why is the former president of Honduras not a regional threat, who was personally involved in, hundreds of tons?
So let me take the second one for the first one. On the president of Honduras, I'm not involved in the pardon process, which is what that was. He's no longer in office. So that might be.
He was in a U.S. prison.
No, I understand, but I can't comment on our pardons process because that's not an area that I have many jobs, but that ain't one of them. So I'm not hiding from it. I'm just telling you I don't know. I can't give you an informed answer on that because I was just involved in that process. As far as the question of Maduro and his impediment, look, I've just made the observation that it's hard to make a deal with someone. Everybody says we should go to negotiation. All I'm observing, I'm just saying all I'm observing is he's never kept any of the deals he's made in the past, which makes it difficult to consider making one in the future. Beyond that, I'm not going to speculate about what might or may not happen. Ultimately, I can tell you what our goals are and what our interests are, and that's how we've defined them.
Well, in 2019, didn't he get bailed out by Cuban military, Cuban intelligence, outside forces? And so ultimately, with this blockade, is this partly, yes, Maduro, but partly to get at Cuba and Iran and the recipients of this sanctioned oil?
This action on the boats, these are sanctioned, but these are enforcement actions. That's what they are. They are existing sanctions. And therefore, 80% of their oil is shipped through ghost fleets. Okay, so we understand what we're talking about here. We are talking about boats that are basically privateers, okay, that are flying under false flags, that turn off the transponders, that spoof their true location. They are hired to evade sanctions. We are simply enforcing sanctions. Every one of these has a court order attached to it. We go to a judge, the judge issues the warrant, we're executing. These are enforcement actions. The fact that they happen to impact a terrorist regime, is a good thing, but they are enforcement actions, and we are conducting enforcement actions. On the case of Ukraine, no one has said that Ukraine is a zero in terms of our national interests. We have sold them billions of dollars worth of weaponry. We've provided them in previous billions of dollars worth of weaponry. We continue to provide them intelligence support. And we have sanctioned. The president has sanctioned the Russian Federation. He issued oil sanctions. All the oil sanctions everybody wanted him to do, he did them. He did them a month and a half ago. All I'm saying, now you point to all the stuff about, does Putin say this? That's why this issue set is difficult. I'm not claiming anything other than the fact that we understand it's difficult. We understand that you're not going to have a deal unless both sides have to give and both sides have to get. Both sides will have to make concessions if you're going to have a deal. You may not have a deal. We may not have a deal. It's unfortunate.
The U.S. should walk away from that if it is not a prime region interest because it's not in our continent.
That's not my decision to make. Ultimately, the president will make a determination if and when he feels like further U.S. engagement is no longer productive or serves the national interest. That's a decision the president have to make. I can't speculate about that. All right. Yes.
Mr. Secretary, a question for you on Venezuela and then quickly on Ukraine. You mentioned Maduro was not the only one indicted by the United States in the Southern District. Does that mean it is U.S. policy that not just Maduro, but his top regime lieutenants, cabinet members, that they all must exit?
Yeah, no, I point to the indictment simply as when people say, well, how do we are alleging that he is, and I guess, you can describe it any way you want. I just want to make clear, this is not something we came up with.
Right.
We're basing it on a federal indictment and a superseding indictment.
Cabello's in there.
Yeah, a bunch of people are. And so, but what it proves is, and the reason why I raise the indictments is because the indictments are the point of the $50 million reward. And I believe the $25 or $10 million reward for Cabello and for others. My point is that this allegation, this claim that the Maduro regime is a narco-terrorist organization is not on the basis of political talk or speculation. It is on the basis of evidence provided to a grand jury in the Southern District of New York that returned an indictment. And that's why I point to those indictments.
Can I ask you on Ukraine quickly? Because Russia has deployed its latest nuclear-capable missile system to Belarus, according to that country's leadership. We've heard from a number of European leaders, the Chancellor of Germany himself, that they think this era of Pax Americana is gone, that they are needing to prepare to be on a war footing because of the threat from Putin. Do you believe, does this administration believe today, that Vladimir Putin will end his march on the eastern flank of Ukraine? And do you stand by our European allies against any kind of attack?
Look, we have heard the same concerns from our allies in NATO. It's why we are in NATO. It's why we meet with them. It's why we talk to them all the time. I've spoken to Mark Rutte this year probably 40 times, and he's spoken to multiple people in our administration as well, multiple times. He's been here multiple times. He speaks to the president directly. It's why the United States basically is over 50% of NATO, both in troop commitments and in financial commitments as well. It's why we remain in NATO. It's why the president had a very positive visit in NATO. In the end, that's why we're in this alliance. And that's why Article 5 in the NATO alliance is important, and the president has reiterated that. We think it's a very strong deterrent against any of these fears or concerns that any of our allies in the region may have. And the president's been clear that we are committed to NATO, we're committed to the alliance, and our commitment isn't just rhetorical. Our commitment is in action, in the troops that have been deployed, in the monies that have been spent, in the capabilities that are located, in the cooperation and that work that we do every single day with our NATO allies. The only thing we're asking for, which is not unfair, is for our partners in the alliance to improve their own capabilities. Because the more capable our allies in NATO are, the more capable NATO is. We're going to keep doing our part. We just want them to do more. And they've committed to do more.
But these allies are saying that they are concerned now.
Sure, and that's why we have NATO.
So nothing has changed? Pax Americana, what the Chancellor of
I
Germany
don't know.
said?
I don't know why he's saying that. You'll have to ask him why he's saying that. The truth of the matter is that NATO is the key defense alliance and agreement that has provided stability on the European continent. We believe it is stronger today than it's ever been because our allies have committed to increase their own defense spending. The more capable our allies are, we've already made our commitment. We've been spending billions and billions and billions. It's the single biggest part of the largest government budget in the world is defense spending in the United States. So we've already done our part, and our part isn't just rhetorical, it's real. We have troops stationed there, we have capabilities there, we have weapons we've provided our partners in the region as well. We believe that if you want a strong NATO, you want your allies in NATO to be stronger. The more capable our allies in NATO are, the stronger NATO is collectively. And that's why we're very pleased to see them make that commitment of 5%, with the exception of Spain. And that's why the president left our NATO gathering earlier this year so enthusiastic about the future of NATO and about our role in it. And in fact, that's why the president's been working with NATO countries on the Pearl program, which is what's providing weaponry to the Ukrainians today. Go ahead.
Secretario, gracias por su tiempo y por atendernos. Sé que esta es como la 10ª pregunta de Venezuela, pero quiero quedar claro con varias cosas. Primero, usted puede hacer una referencia al comentario que hizo el presidente Trump apolítico cuando dijo los días de Maduro están contados. ¿Eso se refiere a días, semanas, meses? ¿Esperamos un 2026 sin Nicolás Maduro? Y me gustaría también que se refiriera a la orden de escoltar esos buques petroleros que acaba de dar Maduro a su armada, esos buques sancionados que ustedes están incautando. Algunos de ellos ya fueron escoltados, no estaban en la lista de sancionados, pero ¿qué pasaría si eso fuera con un buque sancionado? Y por último, Maduro le ha pedido al ejército colombiano que se una como un solo ejército en medio de su desespero por responder a este cerco.
Son 3 preguntas. En el tercero, nosotros no vemos eso como algo serio en términos de involucrar las Fuerzas Armadas de Colombia. En términos de los buques, como bien han dicho, creo que salieron 4 buques ayer, que ninguno de los 4 eran sancionados. Y no existe nada que vaya a impedir nuestra habilidad de poder enforzar las leyes de Estados Unidos en términos de los buques que son sancionados. Y en la primera pregunta yo no voy a especular sobre, tendrá que preguntarle a la Casa Blanca, el comentario del presidente simplemente para decirle que sin duda pensamos que el régimen de Maduro es ilegítimo y que su cooperación con estos grupos terroristas en nuestra región, incluso sus propias actividades terroristas, son una amenaza a la seguridad nacional de Estados Unidos. The 3 points that he asked about, one had to do with the Maduro calling on the Colombian armed forces to join ranks with him, and we're not really focused on that rhetoric. We're also not concerned about, there were 4 boats yesterday that were escorted by so-called naval vessels. Those were not sanctioned boats to begin with. but there's nothing that's going to impede our ability to enforce U.S. law when it comes to sanctions. We're not concerned about that. Sanctioned boats, we have the capabilities necessary to enforce our laws. We'll have a judicial order. We'll execute on those orders, and there's nothing that will impede us from being able to do that. And on the first point, the question was something about President Trump had said that Maduro's days are numbered. I didn't hear that quote. Was that a recent quote? Esto fue reciente?
El 9 de diciembre.
Yeah. So ultimately, look, our observation is the same I've made here repeatedly, which is that the fundamental challenge we have here is that the Maduro regime isn't just illegitimate. They openly cooperate in terrorism against the United States. And that's a problem. And it remains a problem, and it's at the core of this.
Habló con María Corina Machado. ¿Tiene pensado recibirla en Washington?
No está nada programado. Yo creo que ella todavía está en Oslo. Pero es obviamente yo he hablado con ella mucho en el pasado. Go ahead.
Are you going to tell us in English?
He asked about Maria Corina Machado. I believe she's still in Norway. I'm sure there'll be a meet. She'll come to the U.S. at some point, and I've obviously spoken to her many, many times over the years.
Thank you, sir, for taking so much time with us today. How many visas has the State Department revoked under your leadership so far in the last year, and how many of those are student visas?
I forgot the exact number or the breakdown of them. It's over 60 or 70,000 for different variety of reasons. Some are students, some are people that were not in the country, but we denied them re-entry. I can get you the exact numbers. I don't want to be misquoted because that's a rolling number, an average number. But look, this is not a punitive thing. We're going out to try to make examples of it. Our visa system, okay, who you allow to visit your country should reflect the national interest. We said that from the very beginning. It was one of the directives that we got from the president. It's one of the things he ran on. And so our visa process basically is, and there are some times we'll deny people visas because of activities they've undertaken overseas. Other times it's people that have visas but are in the United States doing things that run counter to our national interest. And the law gives us the right, and in fact, I would argue the obligation to remove people like that from our country. And we're going to continue to do it. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean, sometimes somebody comes in and says, oh, I want to come in as a student. They're here as a student, and then once they're here, they're involved in nefarious activity. We're going to remove them from the country. But maybe they're here as a researcher. Maybe they're here as, I don't want to say journalist because you guys will get upset, but, you know, it could be anything. You know, these are visitors to the country. A visa is a visitor. It's not a right. By the way, we deny visas every day all over the world. People will go to an embassy, they'll sit for an interview, and the consular officer will deny them a visa because of something that came up in their record, because of something that came up in their interview, whatever it may be. So if you have the power to deny someone a visa before they get one, you most certainly have the power to revoke it once they get one and then do something they shouldn't be doing. So there's a variety of reasons why visas are denied, but all of them are because it implicates our national interest or national security in some way.
You began the briefing by talking about your confirmation hearing, and one of the core commitments or goals you set for yourself in that hearing was to rid the State Department of anti-Semitism and what the president calls DEI ideology. When you look back at the last year, have you done that, sir?
Have we done what? I'm sorry.
Rid the State Department of anti-Semitism and DEI ideology.
Well, look, I think there were actions that were being taken that we're very concerned about in terms of statements that were made from some missions around the world or actions that were taken. Ultimately, what the president asked for is a government based on merit, where people were being promoted up because of merit, irrespective of their background, their ethnicity, the color of their skin, the first language they spoke, where they were born. We want to promote people on the basis of merit. We have redone the whole process by which we do promotions in the career foreign service. We've redone it in a way that prioritizes the right things. There were people not being promoted in the State Department because even though they were exemplar foreign officers, their DEI score under the previous administration was too low. There were people that were because they weren't committed enough to the DEI cause. So we have very talented people that did not get promoted in the State Department because they did a great job, but they had a low DEI score. We got rid of that. That's not going to exist anymore. We are going to judge people on how good they are at the job that they do. And by the way, we're also opening to promoting people not just based on seniority. We have some very talented, and I say junior officers, like 10 years, 15 years is considered junior around here. They're very talented. If we don't promote some of these people, we're going to lose them. Because there's a lot of money to be made in the private sector, and the people want to pursue in life. If people don't see upward mobility where they work, if they don't see the opportunity that by working hard and being successful, I'm going to be able to get ahead, they think they're reading roadblocks, they may leave and go work for another agency or outside of government. So we want to promote good people on the basis of merit. And I do think we have made changes. In fact, I just today approved a list of foreign service promotions for the president to submit to Congress. And it's on that new basis. So I'm really happy with that program. And look, we'll tinker with it, we'll improve it as time goes on, but we thought it was critically important that people be promoted on the basis of merit and skill, and not on all these other things, and certainly not on a DEI score. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Given that the Brown University and MIT shooter entered the U.S. with a diversity visa and Secretary Noem has since paused the program, is the State Department looking into considering pursuing permanent changes to the green card system, like changes to eligibility rules?
Well, I haven't had a chance to talk to her. I know they suspended that program because they want this. And the reason why you suspend this program is not because you argue everybody who came in under that visa is a bad person and is going to shoot a place up. It's because you want to determine whether there's something in the vetting of that program that's insufficient. Is there a systemic problem in how those decisions are made that needs to be addressed? So I think it's wise to suspend a program until you understand whether there's a deficiency in the program. So you just had a guy that came in through a certain route. You suspend the program to figure out whether something that came up in the interview process should have been a red flag but wasn't identified, so you can fix that before you restart the program. So I would imagine that's the process we're going to go through as well. Okay. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for all your time here today. An issue I believe is close to your heart, Cuba. Is it the policy of the United States to seek regime change in Havana? And should we see the developments that are going on right now with Venezuela, the U.S. policies, as part of an effort to bring down the communist government?
Yeah.
And if I may briefly, do you stand by your statement earlier this year that nobody has died from U.S. aid cuts?
On your first point, I think it's not just a policy of this administration. I think every administration would love to see a different type of situation in Cuba. Cuba was a disaster. It's a disaster. It's not just because they're Marxists and because they're terrorists. They're incompetent. These are incompetent people, and they've destroyed that country. On the second point, I'm very proud of the changes we've made in foreign aid. Just yesterday, the day before, we are, I think before the end of this year, going to enter into over 50 compacts, health compacts with different countries around the world. Understand the way this used to work. We used to go to a country and say, we're going to give you a bunch of money for your health care programs. And then we would go out and hire some NGO in Northern Virginia or whatever. They would take their 60% cut off the top for administrative aid. They would take another 20%. Before you knew it, just a portion of that money was even reaching these countries. In many cases, many of those countries, it is true. I heard somebody whisper that's not true. It is true. In many of these countries, the governments didn't even know how much money was being spent. We are now entering into government-to-government compacts with these governments. And the compacts are the following. Not only are they provided assistance, but they are being provided a plan to build up their own self-sustainment and their own abilities internally. So that in the long term, these countries need less aid because they can now do it for themselves. Some countries may take 5 years, some countries may take longer, but we're very proud of that, and the countries are very excited about that. I'm also very excited about humanitarian aid. It's interesting. Nobody, you guys didn't pay a lot of attention to this, but this happened. In Jamaica, got hit by this hurricane. And everybody, I saw some articles, this is going to be a disaster. The U.S. humanitarian response is not going to be good. It was excellent. Perhaps one of the best humanitarian responses in recent memory in terms of what we were able to bring very quickly to bear in assistance to them, led by our embassy, but also led by the region. And by the way, it was also very helpful that we had a lot of military assets in the region that were able to assist in that as well. We recently had an event in Sri Lanka. Again, we were able to very quickly provide assistance, the assistance they needed. So we're it's still a work in progress. We're still building this out. But I think in the big picture and in the long term, when people look back at this, they're going to say that we redid foreign aid in a way that actually delivered aid more effectively and in a way that furthered our national interests, both. And a lot of it driven from the embassy level. The amount of control and power and influence that our ambassadors and our embassies will now have to help shape how foreign aid looks like in those individual countries is much greater today than it was when you had USAID sitting alongside them almost as an independent branch that oftentimes took actions completely divorced, completely separated from our broader foreign policy. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. First, I want to ask a clarifying question regarding Venezuela. You mentioned you've spoken with the opposition leader repeatedly over the years. When was the last time you spoke with her?
I don't recall. I mean, she was not in a place where talking was very easy. She was in hiding in Venezuela.
Do you think there's a possibility we could be seeing a White House summit with her in any sort of future?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I mean, nothing's been planned.
And then shifting gears a little bit, the State Department mentioned earlier this year some free speech concerns, particularly in Europe. What are some goals you have in regards to that in 2026? Any countries or certain efforts that you have?
Well, I mean, broadly, we're concerned about any place, first and foremost, where American free speech could be implicated, right? Are we going to live in a world where some American puts up a social media post and then gets to some airport somewhere and is arrested? We're also concerned about the impact that some of their policies are having on our social media platforms. As you recently saw, X is facing this massive multi-million-dollar fine that they're going to have to pay, I guess, if they want to continue to operate. But I think more importantly, I think it touches on the broader question that was asked a little bit earlier. We all talk about how these alliances, in many cases our alliances with our European partners, are built on our common principles, our common values, as much as anything else. These aren't just a geopolitical arrangement. It is an alliance with like-minded countries with whom we share values and principles. And one of those values and principles, we hope, is freedom and the freedom of expression. And we're concerned that that is eroding. Okay, thank you, guys.
All right, good afternoon once again, and welcome back into RSBN Live Studio B. I'm Matthew Alvarez, watching, of course, the year-end press conference there at the State Department. Secretary of State Marco Rubio fielding questions from literally every reporter in all of the rows at the State Department there as part of the year-end press conference. Something he asked the reporters, has this ever happened before? And they all laughed and said no. But I think that's what you'll see here as you had the year-end press conference, something the Secretary of State does annually there at the State Department. All right, so it's 1:34, Friday, December 19th. We're going to get into some of our sponsors quickly. I know a number of you are watching now. You'll be watching hopefully tonight as well when we start our coverage at 4 o'clock as President Trump will be speaking in North Carolina. That will be a bit later. In the meantime, any minute from now, we'll also carry President Trump's announcement from the Roosevelt Room at the White House at this point. No word yet on the actual announcement, what the content is of it, but that was slated for 1 o'clock Eastern time. So obviously about 35 minutes late on that, but that's, he's the president, got a lot going on, of course. At 5:45, the president will participate in the Christmas reception at the Grand Foyer of the White House. At this hour, that 5:45 event is closed to the press. However, after that, the president will board Air Force One and then fly again to North Carolina for that speech that's slated for 9 o'clock tonight. We will be live, as this is some sort of a kind of a RSBN doubleheader of sorts, as we have a lot of coverage today. That coverage starts at 4 o'clock Eastern. So I know it's a lot of numbers thrown at you, but at the end of the day, if you check us out on Rumble, if you check us out on X, Truth Social, download our app, you'll see all of the start times for the various events. This, while TPUSA has their AmFest going on as well. So let's get into a few of our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. Let's first start with All Family Pharmacy. Here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, we always try to point you toward companies that actually support your freedom and give you real choices. And that's exactly why we trust All Family Pharmacy. They're not your traditional pharmacy pushing flu shots. They're actually just simply different. They give you options. They encourage you to take charge of your health and stay prepared, and they have the right medications on hand before sickness hits. And of course, during the holidays, that's important. The travel, the cold weather, the family gatherings, this is when, unfortunately, a lot of people can get sick. So the question is, why wait until someone is miserable and you're scrambling for appointments or pharmacy lines? All Family Pharmacy has everything your family might need. Antivirals, antibiotics, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, mebendazole, even emergency kits and supplements. So all doctor reviewed and delivered fast to your door. So while you're out doing that holiday shopping, there's nothing wrong with adding a few essential medications your family might need. You could stock up, stay prepared, and keep your family healthy this season. You could visit allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN, and you see right there the special sale that's happening, $1 per capsule. This is for the 6 milligram ivermectin. That is a flash sale that is ending on the 23rd. So a great sale there by All Family Pharmacy. You see that right there on your screen. It's 137. Let's go to a couple other sponsors before we move on with more of our live coverage. Wall Street veterans are sounding the alarm. Many now say that gold could actually climb up to $7,000 per troy ounce. This is before President Trump finishes his term, and it's not wild speculation. Experienced investors and economists and portfolio managers are tracking the indicators: soaring national debt, unchecked government spending, and a dollar that's losing purchasing power by the day. So what's even more revealing is the behavior of central banks. They're trimming their exposure to U.S. Treasuries and increasing their gold reserves. They recognize the pattern out there, and they know that paper currencies eventually fail, but gold has remained a reliable store of value throughout history. That's why we rely on Monetary Gold. With more than 25 years in business, an A-plus rating from that Better Business Bureau, always good to have that, and also top 5 rankings from Consumer Affairs and Retirement Living. They've earned a reputation of trust and expertise. All you have to do is give them a call, 888-617-7994. Go to rsbnforthegold.com. This is before the next major move in the gold market. You can get a free info kit with Monetary Gold. All Family Pharmacy, Monetary Gold, 2 great sponsors. Let's go to angelpaste.com out of Spring, Texas as well. If you'd like to use the RSBN promo code, it always goes a long way. Gets a nice discount there for a number of great products, including the flagship product that you see right there on your screen, the Miracle Cream. So Angel Paste, based in Spring, Texas. And of course, they hire military veterans, and it's awesome to see that. And being a longtime sponsor here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. All right, so it's 1:39, Friday, December 19th. You see the White House there. Now, 1 o'clock was the scheduled start time for an announcement from the president. It's about 1:40 at this point, so we'll stay here live with you and await that moment there where he gives that address or that announcement that's happening at 1 o'clock. Or we'll see what time it actually happens, 2 o'clock maybe on the East Coast. And of course, different times across the time zones that you're watching in right now. But in the meantime, again, for those of you just joining us, we know that 4 o'clock Eastern, we'll have Robert McNeely there live in Rocky Mount in North Carolina, speaking to a number of great Patriots. If you remember, just a couple weeks back, I was in Mount Pocono, Pennsylvania, nice and cold there. Speaking with some of the Patriots outside prior to that event. So you can tune in at 4 o'clock Eastern for that. So we'll see the president twice today. We'll see him here in just a little bit, making that announcement from that Roosevelt room at the White House. And then, of course, you can catch President Trump's speech tonight right here on Right Side Broadcasting Network. In case you missed it, I interviewed Tina Peters' attorney, Peter Tickton, this week and asked him if the U.S. Marshals would get Tina out of jail. Following President Trump's pardon, here's what Peter Tickton had to say.
It could happen, but I think before that would happen, I think that she would probably be declared also a material witness in the investigations that are ongoing. What's of great importance that it needs to get out there, people need to understand that when President Trump says that there's a truckload of evidence that can prove that the machines basically have corrupted the election and the election in 2020 was stolen. It's so important because the election of 2020 wasn't stolen. The nation was stolen. For 4 years, we were under the governance of a government that was put in by foreign actors. In other words, we lost a war without having a shot fired. So, you know, we got our country back. We got our president in place. Now it's time to consolidate that, and there's no way to do that without the world knowing that this is what happened, that we're facing a force of evil that basically took over the United States. We got it back, we're taking it back, but it's not going to stay in our hands unless we have free elections in 2026. And the only way to have free elections in 2026 is that there's going to need to be an order from the president that declares an election emergency. And that's not going to happen unless the people understand that there really is an election emergency. And I have been one of the people involved in looking at the evidence itself. I can tell you there are these computers that cannot be used. It has to be papered ballots. It has to be, and the only reason it has to be is that's the only way that we're going to be able to have a fair election. And then let's just see what happens in terms of the numbers of people in the House of Representatives. Then let's see what happens to the numbers of people in the Senate. And we're going to see that common sense is going to prevail.
And that's what we always want to see, is common sense prevailing. Of course, our love for God, family, country, freedom, common sense truth, justice, and the American way. I mean, that's what we, the people, the majority of the country, believe in, those things that I just mentioned there. And that's what, we believe in here at Right Side, and of course in conservative media as a whole, as we are the solution to the fake news out there, the fake news lying, the fake news on the left side of history, the wrong side of history. And not only the news, but them just, being that megaphone for those that are the extremists that are anti everything I just mentioned, literally anti-God, anti-family, anti-freedom, anti-country. At the heart of the matter, that's what it is. And people just need to tell it like it is out there, as you guys know, because that's really what we're up against. It's good versus evil. And what we're hoping for is, peace throughout our country and having the right people in office to make the right decisions for our Constitution to stay the law of the land. At the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. But right now, of course, there's a lot of forces trying to really wreck our nation. But I'm so glad that President Trump's in office and not Kamala Harris. So let's see more wins, of course, from now until the end of the term. And then we'll see what happens in 2028, 2029. But you know what? Let's not even go that far. Let's just go to the midterms, 2026. We have to win those. So there's just a lot at stake for our country and for our freedoms, I believe, and that's my opinion there. But in the meantime, we can get back into the news flow here in just a second. Let's go to a couple sponsors. As we have aired that Secretary of State year-end press conference for, I believe it was north of 2 hours. So missed a lot of the time there to talk about our great sponsors. So we will be doing that as we cover the president's speech there, or the announcement from the Roosevelt Room. Again, haven't heard any details as to what that is, even though we get emails just like any network does from the White House on the public schedule. All right, let's go back to All Family Pharmacy, and you'll see here $1 per capsule, $1 per capsule, 6 milligram ivermectin. So here's the thing. You have to go to allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN exclusively to get that sale, that flash sale. So you have to say, or type in allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN to get that. And here at Right Side, we always try to point you toward those companies that actually support your freedom and give you real choices. And that's exactly why we trust All Family Pharmacy. So they give you a lot of options there. And of course, during the holidays, maybe you're out there shopping a little bit, or maybe in a colder climate and maybe in the north, that kind of thing. Always good to pick up some of these great products that will just kind of keep you healthy, keep things at bay. So you can do that with All Family Pharmacy. Again, go to allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN, and you can use the RSBN10 promo code to get 10% off as well, site-wide. So allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. We'll be talking more about that great sponsor there. And I interviewed Lars Larson, the conservative radio host, recently on behalf of All Family Pharmacy. We may be able to get to that interview today. If we don't, we'll be airing that at least by Monday, ideally, as we have a great interview with Lars in store for you. All right, so 1:46, Friday, December 19th. You see callsheet.com/RSBN. Those of you that are into sports out there, I know I am. Ohio State, Indiana, or Georgia. Who's going to win the national championship? Who knows? Maybe a different team. For those of you that don't care about sports, guess what? On Call Sheet, you can actually check out a ton of different topics right there on callsheet.com/RSBN. So use the QR code or download the app, or just go to callsheet.com/RSBN, a great sponsor here on Right Side Broadcasting Network. I believe we have one more sponsor, CovePure.com, one of my favorite, because here's the reason why it's one of my favorite. Because sometimes people say they're a snob for certain things. I will admit I'm a water snob. I don't want to drink tap water. I have to drink filtered water, all right? So this is a great, great company right here with a great product that you can do that. 99.9% of any kind of solids or chemicals that they're taken out of the tap water with this great filter here. So it's going to taste better. It's healthier for you. $250 off for this holiday sale right now. So you can't beat that. That's great. So drink pure, live pure. CovePure.com/RSBN. 3 great sponsors. We have many to talk about today. And of course, tonight at the event in North Carolina where Robert McNeely will be live. I'll be here in the studio. We'll have a little bit of tag team coverage, but it'll be great to hear from the Patriots outside of the venue tonight as we cover the president, as we cover the White House, and as we cover conservative news. At the end of the day, we know what matters, and what matters is truth, right? Transparency and truth. And that's, as a journalist, that's what I'm supposed to cover, right? We're not supposed to have an agenda that's on the wrong side of history, spewing all sorts of stuff to try and sway public opinion. That's a lot of power you can have, in media. And I guess you can understand it when people are coming from an evil agenda, they're going to want to use that power to their advantage. But in conservative media, what I'm seeing here at Right Side and what I see with other networks and podcasters and citizen journalists and those that have tons of followers on social media, they're doing this because they either have talent, or if they don't have talent, it doesn't really matter, because guess what? They're speaking truth. At the end of the day, if you're speaking the truth about what's going on in our country, about what is needed to win and to save our nation, that's what matters. And I believe that's what I would want to watch. That's what I do like watching. Even though I'm like part of conservative media, I still like to watch and see what's going on out there. Now, that's a lot of general talking points, but if you want to drill down a bit, it's simple to have common sense as the main way of looking at things and decision making. It is all about God, family, country, and freedom. That's all about our Constitution. I'm not going to try and speak all eloquently about things. I'm just going to tell it like it is, like many of you like to hear. And that's why President Trump won 3 straight elections. Let's be real about that. It wasn't all presidential and all stiff and, he was able to get out there and say what he had to say. There are plenty of things that we want to see done in this administration until the end of it. As we know, we have to win those midterms as well. So there's just a lot from that balanced standpoint here at Right Side, as it's 149. Let's go to monetary gold as well. Wall Street veterans are sounding the alarm. Many now say gold can climb to $7,000 per troy ounce before President Trump finishes his term. And that's not wild speculation. Experienced investors and the economists out there, portfolio managers, they're tracking the indicators. Soaring national debt, unchecked government spending, and a dollar that's losing purchasing power by the day. So what's even more revealing is the behavior of central banks. They're actually trimming their exposure to U.S. treasuries and increasing their gold reserves, and they recognize the pattern. They know that paper currencies eventually fail, but gold has remained a reliable store of value throughout history. So you could give them a call there. Get that free info kit on gold, 888-617-7994, or go to RSBNforthegold.com for that free info kit on monetary gold. So a great company there. Also, angelpaste.com out of Spring, Texas. We do know that you can use the RSBN promo code and get quite the discount off there. Always good to have that. Always good to have a good product too. And to purchase from a small business, especially conservative small business like Angel Paste there. So peruse the website, check it out, angelpaste.com, as we are approaching Christmas time, which is only a few days away now, December 19th. So if you're traveling, stay safe. And I know we're traveling as well. So anyway, looking live there at the White House right now, 1:51 Eastern Time, December 19th. At 1 o'clock, that was the scheduled start time for an announcement from the Roosevelt Room by President Trump. Not sure yet on the details of the announcement, and not sure when we're actually going to see the president, as it was slated for 1. But as you guys know, and if you've grown accustomed to it, I've grown accustomed to it because I've covered a number of rallies. If the president is slated to speak at 7 o'clock, most of the time it's not right at 7, if you know what I mean. It's a little bit later. There's a lot, of course, to take care of as the commander-in-chief. So as soon as we see a live feed, we'll take you there. In the meantime, at 4 o'clock Eastern Time, we'll have another broadcast. It'll be from North Carolina. I'll be live here in studio. Robert McNeely will be boots on the ground there in North Carolina, as the president will be traveling to the Tar Heel State a little bit later. In the meantime, let's take a quick commercial break. This is RSBN Live. I'm Matthew Alvarez. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in a second.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed. So join us and be part of the right side of history.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from Diamond and Silk Chit Chat Live. Look, don't forget to watch my show right here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. It's imperative that you do so, okay? Bye-bye.
allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. You can scan that QR code now, RSBN10. That is the code, easy to remember, for 10% off. This is ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, antibiotics that will save you and yours from bacterial and viral infections, NAD+, and much, much more. 200 essential medications and emergency medical kits, the meds you trust delivered to your door.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity.
All right, welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network. It's a 1:54 on this Friday, December 19th. Thanks again for streaming in, looking at the beautiful red, white, and blue Old Glory right there on the north lawn of the White House. Of course, a smaller flag directly on top of the White House, and then the same sized flag on the south lawn of the White House. Thanks to President Trump for putting up the red, white, and blue right there in the middle of your screen there. As we are approaching that 2 o'clock hour, as soon as we see President Trump, we'll carry that live. He will be speaking from the Roosevelt Room. There's an announcement that is according to the public schedule by the White House Communications Office, who sends that out to the media usually the night prior. So we saw there that there's a 1 o'clock event. As of now, obviously, we're approaching the 2 o'clock hour, but 1 o'clock on the Central Time Zone. But anyway, so as soon as we see that, we'll take you there. At 5:45 Eastern, the president participates in a Christmas reception in the grand foyer of the White House. At this hour, that event is closed to the press. However, after that, the president will board Air Force One and fly to North Carolina for his 9 o'clock speech tonight, Eastern Time. That, of course, you can see right here on Right Side. And our live coverage for tonight's North Carolina event starts at 4 o'clock Eastern. So a lot of different times there. Hopefully you're tracking with me on that. But at the end of the day, I guarantee if you just stay with the channel, you're going to catch all of the coverage here. And on top of that, there are times when, if we're not live and there's an event going on, we'll always upload that. Even sometimes when it's just President Trump taking off on Air Force One and landing in various parts of the country. So obviously it's something you've counted on for more than a decade now, for those of you that have been loyal viewers since 2015. If you have been watching Right Side Broadcasting Network since 2015, whether you're watching on Rumble right now or another platform like YouTube, go ahead and type in there, hey, I've been watching Right Side Broadcasting Network since 2015. Say, I've been watching since 2015. And thanks to our sponsors and thanks to many of you that are donors to this network, we're able to keep the lights on and keep it on here at Right Side. Also, let's go to callsheet.com. Speaking of sponsors, if you're looking to bet or trade or just check out polls, you can do that with Callsheet. This site is pretty awesome. You have more than 1 million people that are using this site as well. And it's fun to check out the polls, to be straight up with you. I mean, whether it's weather, science, technology, sports, music, faith, politics, whatever, it's on there. And they go into some more specifics too, like that there, the college football championship winner, that kind of thing. Well, you can check that out if you'd like. You can use the QR code. You can also go to callsheet.com/RSBN or just download the app. 3 ways to get the Call Sheet. And glad they're with us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. Let's go to Angel Paste well, go ahead. Let's go to Angel Paste one more time. I was just following my director saying Angel Paste, so we'll continue with that. Angelpaste.com out of Spring, Texas, of course. Use that RSBN promo code. That goes a long way there for you. There's a lot of different products on the site there, and I'm sure if by now you may have already purchased what you're purchasing for Christmas, especially when it's online shopping. You know, the shipping takes a second, but check them out. Angelpaste.com. You may be able to get things before Christmas there for you. And if not, still great products. Speaking of great products, covepure.com/RSBN, a $250 holiday sale right now. So $250 off of this great product there. So those of you that like tap water, well, maybe don't listen to this sponsor, because this is for those of you that are not fans of tap water and you're just looking to have water that tastes much better. So there's no aftertaste with chemicals and whatever that's in that tap water. But you'll have it more healthy water, it tastes better. You have the cold, warm, hot option as well. A very sleek design, great for the countertop right there. Drink Pure, Live Pure, Cove Pure, holiday sale, $250 off for a limited time. You could use that QR code or just go to covepure.com/RSBN. We're approaching the 2 o'clock hour, 1 minute away from the top of the hour. We see that the White House is live right there from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and we're about to see President Trump for that announcement from the Roosevelt Room. So I'm not sure if we have a picture of that quite yet, but as soon as we do, well, there it is. So we're going to see the president enter the Roosevelt Room. As soon as we see the commander-in-chief, yours truly, Matthew Alvarez, will be quiet, and we'll listen in to President Trump, of course, as we await this announcement from the president. I can't read it from this vantage point. Director, do you know what that says on the right side of the screen there, that slate or that graphic that's there, poster board? If you can let me know what that says, that kind of gives a heads up on what the announcement's about. In the meantime, we can go to President Trump as well from a little bit of information about the Freedom 250. So Freedom 250 is all about our country turning 250 years young in July. Okay, lower drug prices is what it says on that chart. Thank you to the director and the producer here at Right Side for that information. So this will be about lower drug prices. We'll have that announcement here in a minute. And then after that announcement, we'll be carrying some more live coverage. And then a bit later at 4 o'clock Eastern, we'll be starting back up. And we will have Robert McNeely live in North Carolina, as the president will be traveling there tonight. So I'll be in studio for some coverage. Robert will be there live. And of course, it'll be great to see just MAGA patriots out there getting ready to see President Trump. Also, outside of that, you know, at the end of the day, whether you call it MAGA, America First, you know, the Tea Party movement, the conservative movement, the freedom movement, I think at the end of the day, what we're looking at is people that are just saying, hey, we want the Constitution to continue to be the law of the land. We don't want to turn into some other country that takes away freedoms. We don't want to, take God out of our country. We don't want our country to be anti-family, anti all the good things, you know. That's really the crux of all of this, really the heart of the matter, right? And I think that's what many of you are watching Right Side, because you're just so sick of the junk that you see on the left wing when it comes to the mainstream media. And we've seen that obviously for decades. And we all thought that they had it going on, you know, at least a lot of us might have, you know. You might have said, oh yeah, the media is liberal or they have a bias. But then you saw President Trump come in and call him out and call him fake news, and the rest is history on that title. So you don't want to work for the fake news. I did for a little bit of time in local media, but you know, you got to learn some of the TV skills in whatever media you can, and then hopefully get to the right side of history as soon as possible. As we're looking live again, lower drug prices. You see that there. Lower drug prices for Americans. And we see a number of the organizations involved with this, as we see President Trump will be arriving there any minute from now. And as soon as we go there, I'm sure there'll be, that Q&A after that the president usually does with the press. So we just heard, speaking of Q&A, about 2 hours of a press conference with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, speaking about a number of different things, including Venezuela and Gaza and a number of international affairs there. If you missed any of this broadcast, of course, you always have that option to replay anything as you watch it from whatever platform you're watching on right now. But thanks for doing that, and thanks for sticking with us here on Right Side. All right, so we're not going to go to any more videos at this point, obviously, because the president may step into that room any second from now. But I can go over some of the programming notes, and we can also, kind of have a fireside chat here as we continue to await the Commander-in-Chief at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Again, that's the Roosevelt Room right now. That's a live picture there. And if you'd like to follow us on Right Side Broadcasting Network, you can do that on Truth Social at RSBN or at RSB Network on X. If you'd like to follow me, I'm on X pretty recently. I was off of X for some time. I just, we saw what happened back in the day with the Twitter files and all that. And I was like, you know what? And then Truth Social came out. So I've been on Truth Social for 3 years, and I love Truth Social. But on Truth Social, it's at Matthew Alvarez, and on X, it's at Matthew US Media. All right, you can get America First updates as you see there as well. rsbnetwork.com/newsletter is the place to go for that. So you can always get the newsletter from us, and also, get a lot of announcements, exclusive offers, that kind of thing right there on Right Side Broadcasting Network's newsletter. Let's go over some of the housekeeping items when it comes to the programming notes for today and for tonight. Obviously, we see that the president will be speaking there, delivering that announcement any minute from now. This is about lower drug prices. After that, most likely we'll take questions from the press, so always interesting to hear about that. On top of that, at 5:45, the president participates in a Christmas reception in the Grand Foyer of the White House. That at this hour, we're told that the event is closed to the press. After that, the president will board Air Force One over there at Joint Base Andrews and then head to North Carolina. He's going to be in Rocky Mount, North Carolina tonight. You can see that speech right here on Right Side. And then our coverage will start in about, actually, an hour and, 55 minutes from now. So at 4 o'clock Eastern, we'll have live coverage from North Carolina. So a lot of Right Side Broadcasting Network content today, as you guys have seen us, just go from live event to the next live event. And, sometimes we have the time to do a number of interviews and a number of deeper dives into news stories out there. Always something that we like to do as well. And it's always good to, fill that time as we cover the various live events here on the network. All right. So other than interviewing Peter Tickton the other day, the attorney for Tina Peters, we are believing and praying for her release. 9 years sentenced, 9 years for doing something that was kind of just showing what's going on there in the election system in Colorado. So we know that the majority of Americans are saying she should be released from jail. The president pardoned her, but there's those state charges still that are sitting there. So we'll have to give updates as we get them, as we have a few different angles there of the Roosevelt Room and a number of medical professionals standing behind the president when he takes to that podium there. Also, today was the deadline for the DOJ to release in full the Epstein files. It looks as if there will be, I believe it said more than 100,000 files released today of sorts of what's in the files, but not all of them will be released. That according to various reports. So that's just what I'm tracking when it comes to that story. Another story that, of course, is very important should be very important to every American is that story is one. And then the second is securing our elections. The voter ID, the proof of citizenship, same-day voting, paper ballots, all the things to just simply make it a free and fair election. We don't want to think of the word rigging or stolen or any of that stuff anymore. We are one of the only countries on earth that don't have a voter ID. I remember Elon Musk on X posted a graphic showing all of the countries that have voter ID, and it named a lot of nations and had a little green check mark next to those countries. And guess which country didn't have one? The United States of America. We had an X, a red X by us because we don't have voter ID. You need an ID to drive a car. You need an ID for a lot of things. We should have an ID for one of the most important things that we do in this country, vote. And the midterm elections As John Strand said the other day, running for Congress there in Florida, we interviewed him live from Phoenix, Arizona, as he's at AmFest this weekend. He said, this is our generation's 1776. The 2026 midterm is our generation's 1776. So, yeah, I mean, this is a huge election that's coming up, even though, you know, we're a few days from Christmas. We're going to have hopefully a nice time with family, just a good time, you know, celebrating the holidays and all of that. But I know on the back of the mind, or maybe just forefront of your mind, is our country and our country being secure and protected when it comes to the constitutional rights that we have. We see what's happening in other countries, and we don't want that happening here. And that's why we vote. That's why we speak up. That's why I do what I do. I want to have freedom. I want to be able to say, hey, I like, you know, this person, but I don't like that person, and that's not a problem. Or I don't believe in that woke ideology. That should not be a problem, but it is in other countries, and we don't want that here. It's as simple as that, and I know you guys agree with me on that because I'm just speaking common sense. This is stuff that I would just talk to you about if I was out at a restaurant or if we were at a football game or something. We would all say the same thing because it's the truth, and that's the train that we're on in conservative media, and it's always good to be on that train. All right, so as we await the president, our director and our producer will be watching the Roosevelt Room. We're going to go to some of our sponsors as I'm being directed to do that right now. So we're going to go to some of our sponsors. If we see the president step in, we'll cut directly from the sponsor directly to President Trump. So one of the sponsors, if we didn't have these sponsors, by the way, and great donors to the network, it would be very difficult to be able to air all of this live because it costs a lot of money, believe it or not, for live pool feeds like this and all of the other things that happen to run a network. Let's go to All Family Pharmacy in the meantime. So you could see 10% off. Use that RSBN 10 promo code because here at RSBN, we always try to point you toward those companies that actually support your freedom and give you real choices. And that's exactly why we trust All Family Pharmacy. So they're not your traditional pharmacy pushing flu shots. They're different. They give you options, including a number of options. They have everything your family needs, your antivirals, antibiotics, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, mebendazole, even emergency kits and supplements. And it's all doctor reviewed and delivered fast to your door. So you can go to allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN and you can save 10% by just using the RSBN 10 promo code. And later tonight, you might want to watch the rally. There's a special tonight from All Family Pharmacy as well. Let's go to Monetary Gold as we await the president. You know, a lot of the Wall Street, veterans out there are sounding the alarm, and many are now saying that gold could actually climb to, get this, more than $7,000 per troy ounce before President Trump finishes his term. Right now, it's north of $4,000 per troy ounce for gold. It's not wild speculation. The experienced investors and the economists and portfolio managers are actually tracking the indicators, the soaring national debt, the unchecked government spending, and a dollar that's losing purchasing power by the day. So we trust Monetary Gold with more than 25 years in business, an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, and top 5 rankings from Consumer Affairs and Retirement Living. They've earned a reputation for trust and expertise, and you can actually get a free info kit on gold, on silver. Silver also above $60 right now per troy ounce. So great to see silver doing well. Monetary Gold right there. You can call them at 888-617-7994 or go to rsbnforthegold.com today for that free info kit. Callshe.com/RSBN. One more sponsor here for you. If you'd like to bet or trade or just check out the polls, you can go to callshe.com/RSBN. You have the QR code right there on the screen, or you can download the app, or you can go to callshe.com/RSBN. All sorts of topics, as I mentioned earlier, whether it's science or technology or sports, music, faith, politics, weather. And as you see there, college football championship winner, ? Well, Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia. Who knows? Maybe another team. We'll see. That's a bit later in the football bowl series, so we'll wait for that national championship game. But anyway, so callshe.com, a great sponsor here on Right Side Broadcasting Network, as it's 2:12 Eastern Time. Again, Friday, December 19th, Matthew Alvarez awaiting the Commander-in-Chief there for this announcement. It was originally slated for 1 o'clock. It's now 2:12. but obviously a busy day there at the most powerful building on earth, the most powerful office on earth. That's why we call the President of the United States the leader of the free world. Now, the question is the free world. We want to make sure our country, and as many other countries out there, can be free, but obviously America first. We want our country to continue in freedom. You know, growing up, for me, it wasn't, an issue of freedom because we always had it. It wasn't questioned. It was something we had. Right now, it seems as if, when the cancel culture thing happened, we overcame that, of course, because it was just a leftist tactic. But, people saying certain things, remember getting censored for saying certain things? Come on. What, you're afraid of the truth? You're afraid of telling it like it is? We're not supposed to be afraid of that, and we weren't. But that's something that other countries are dealing with right now. The people there, think about the people of Ireland or the people of the United Kingdom or just people anywhere, really, that are dealing with a government that's saying, well, you really can't say that. And if you do, on your door. Well, that's the thing that I think we need to fight for is our freedoms. And that's always the way it's going to be, unfortunately, because you know what? We always have these people that are running, the globalist situation out there, maybe deep state, both of them and others that kind of get off on evil. They love evil. It sucks that it's that way, but we have to just keep telling it like it is and stand strong, just like the late, great Charlie Kirk did. And out there at AmFest right now in Phoenix, Arizona, I went to that conference back in 2022 with my girlfriend at the time. She's now my wife. Thank God. Love you. It was a great conference. It's great to hear from great speakers. I know there's a lot more drama this time around. I'm just calling it like it is with a couple speakers. But at the end of the day, finding the truth, researching truth, staying on the right side of history is really that 30,000 foot view that I like to fly in the 30, 35,000 foot view, as you may notice. But sometimes, you can go down lower and dive into some stories. It's stuff that I've done before in the past, and whether it's an investigation into a story or whatever. And that's part of being a journalist, asking questions. And the who, what, where, when, why, and how is what it's all about, as you guys know. Or if you don't know, really, that's all it's about. And many times, the mainstream media will try and tell you this is why this is happening. But they're speaking on behalf of people that are lying directly to you. And so that's why conservative media is the David and Goliath situation. But we know that David is on the right side of history and was on the right side of history. Even though he did certain things that are in the Bible that were awful, he did a lot of things that were great as well. A man after God's own heart. And obviously took down Goliath. So figuratively speaking, now in media, conservative media is the David. And I remember being at a rally, I think it was in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, back when President Trump gave us a shout out from the rally stage there. I remember one of the people that we were interviewing saying that that's exactly what it is. Right Side Broadcasting Network, conservative media, you are the David against Goliath. And guess what? We know who wins. It's pretty cool to be on the winning side, guys. And I know that you're watching right now in the majority of the country that believes in the same thing. And we're not afraid to talk about it. It's okay to talk about your faith. It's okay to talk about freedom. And these are the things that you couldn't really talk about when it comes to mainstream media. So now we're out there saying, hey, we want our country to have a secure election. We want people to be held accountable for breaking the law. We want law and order. We want, if I didn't say it yet, secure elections. We want all the things. We want transparency, all of them, And that's really where this is coming from. Because, you think about it, a lot of times the people that are on TV, on the left side of history, in the sense of the wrong side, they don't represent the people. They don't serve God, family, country. They serve the Marxist agenda. They serve communism. They serve socialism. They serve globalists. They serve socialists. They serve all the wrong things. But thank God for conservative media, because we serve God, family, country, freedom, common sense, truth, justice in the American way. Is anybody perfect? No, but guess what? We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Everybody has a journey and a story. But thanks be to God through Jesus Christ that we are able to be renewed in our minds, to be able to speak truth, to be able to fight for what is right, and that's for freedom. Let's go to President Trump right now at the White House. So Matthew out.
It's a hell of a group. How are you?
Pleasure. Mr. President.
Pleasure to see you, yes. These are the greatest executives in the country, in the world. Nice to see you. It's a great honor. These are among the greatest executives anywhere in the world, so it's an honor to have them with us, and I think they'll be very happy about what we have to say. I thought I'd start by announcing two things. This is the gold card that, as you know, the Secretary of Commerce and myself and some others have been working on for quite a while. And Howard, how much have we sold in a few days?
$1.3 billion worth in a matter of a couple of days.
That's essentially it's the green card on steroids, and it's a pathway, and it's been an amazing thing. And as you know, millions of people pour into our country from the border, and not anymore. They don't know. Nobody comes in actually anymore. But under the Biden administration, 25 million people came in, and they came from prisons and mental institutions, and they were drug dealers, and all sorts of people came in that shouldn't be here. They came from the jails all over Venezuela, all over the world, the Congo. And now when they come in, they have to pay $1 million. And we've had a tremendous surge, and you're going to be happier than anybody because when you go to Harvard and the Wharton School of Finance and all of the great schools and you want to hire somebody, and then you find out that, I'm sorry, they can't stay in our country for more than 24 hours. They graduate from the top schools. These people want to hire them. Now you're able to buy a card, and you're able to keep people in the country. They can't keep people in the country, and they go to Canada. They go to other countries. A lot of times they go to Canada, even though they work for the companies behind me. So now you're able to buy. The companies are able to buy the card and use it for people coming in to our country so they can stay in our country instead of being immediately shipped out after graduating. They graduate number one in their class at the best school, and they want to go to work for Johnson & Johnson, as an example, who's not here today, who will be here next week. They're well represented here. But they want to go to work for one of the great companies behind me, and you learn they can't do that because they're shipped out of the country. They're not shipped out anymore. So your company will pay a little bit, but that's okay. You'll be able to get them. So I just wanted to, it's called the gold card, the Trump gold card. Quite a beautiful thing. And you've taken in just a few days, you've taken in over $1.5 billion. That goes all toward reducing debt, goes into the Treasury of the United States. And I thought I'd do this before we start on Most Favored Nations. I want to read this because I would have said it the other night, but I was not allotted too much time, actually. You had a couple of brand new shows opening, and I understand that. But I do want to say, and some people say, oh, you shouldn't say it. It sounds negative. To me, I think it sounds positive. The only reason our unemployment tucked up and went up to 4.5%, which it went up to 4.5%, which is quite a low number, but still, is because we are reducing the government workforce by numbers that have never been seen before. In other words, government jobs are way down. And as you know, we don't need 10 people to fill one job, which is what we had in government in many cases. So the government workforce, by numbers that have never been seen before, has been reduced very substantially, and it will continue to be reduced. 100% of our new jobs are in the private sector. So this is for the last number of months. Think of that, 100%. Are you shocked to hear that? That's the way to make America great again, when you think, right? It's the only way. 100% of new jobs are in the private sector. And I could reduce unemployment to 2%, 1%, or practically zero by just hiring people into the federal government, even though those jobs are not necessary, which is what we had before. We had millions and millions of people having jobs that they never even showed up. So I wish that the media would report that the 4.5% is an amazing number. And again, if they don't report it, I guess maybe I'll just let some people go into the federal workforce. It'll look really wonderful. And what we're doing is the only way you can do it to make a country great. You can't have the government jobs. You have to have the private sector jobs. And these are among the biggest hires of private sector. So we have reduced the federal workforce by tremendous hundreds of thousands of people. And that reflects in unemployment, but that will be used up very quickly. And we've 100% of the new jobs, which, by the way, it's a record-setting number of jobs, too, is in the private sector. And I think that'll get even stronger when these buildings being built all over the country, of which they're building some, too. But AI and auto plants and everything else, they're being built all over the country. When that happens, your numbers will be even better. But I would like you to report it the way it is. We don't do the federal workforce jobs. We're reducing that very substantially. I'm thrilled to be joined by the leaders of 9 of the world's largest pharmaceutical manufacturers, all very big names, celebrities in their own right, very, very powerful people. And they head some of the most admired companies anywhere in the world. It's a great group. To announce that they've agreed to offer many of their flagship drugs, really all of their flagship drugs, at heavily discounted, most favored nations prices. In other words, whatever the drug sells for over the world, in the world, whatever the lowest number is, if it's Germany, if it's in UK, anywhere, we will match that price. Right now, sometimes it's 10 times higher. We've been laughed at and scoffed at for years. For years. In fact, I was going to do it in my first term, but unfortunately, with the advent of COVID, as you would say, it was not, I don't think it was a very good time to be hitting up Spain, Italy, France, but now we're doing it. So the hardest thing to do was going to be to get a country to do it, because we would have a pill in New York that was for sale for $130, and you could buy it in Germany and France and Spain and someplace anyways. They set their own prices for $10. So we'd pay 10 or 13 times more, we'd pay 5 times more, we'd pay all different prices. Now, whatever the lowest price is. Now, the pharmaceutical companies were difficult, but they also love our country. They knew it was unfair. And they were great. I appreciate it. But the bigger problem was going to be the countries. How are you going to get the countries to do it? And we told them, if you don't do it, we're going to have to use tariffs, and we're going to charge you a 10% tariff, which is far more money than the money we're talking about. And they immediately agreed to do it. So we have all the foreign countries agreeing to do it. If we didn't have the use of tariffs, we would never be able to do this. But we used tariff, and they said, is it a threat? I said, yes, it is a threat. Then they said, we will do it. And they dropped the price. So what's happening, because the world is bigger than the United States in terms of people, that same pill would go from $10 to $20 for them, which is an increase, but it wouldn't go to, midway. But it would go from $10 to $20. Ours would go from $130 to $20. So we dropped way down. They went up a little bit. And everyone knows it's the way it is. They, for years, would just say, no, as medicine got more expensive for us, it would stay. They said, nope, you can't sell it in this country. Let the United States pay. And we had other presidents, all of them, said, okay, we'll pay. So we were subsidizing the entire world. We're not doing it anymore. This is the biggest thing having to do with drugs in the history of the purchase of drugs. And I don't think the maybe press will treat it as a story. This is the biggest front page story that you'll ever see. This has a huge bearing too on the healthcare, because a big part of healthcare is drugs, pharmaceuticals, right, Oz? And this will have a tremendous impact on the reduction of healthcare. The biggest impact is going to be that the money should be paid not to the insurance companies, directly to the people, and the people will buy their own health care. So we're going to be working that. The problem is that the Democrats are very much controlled by the insurance companies that make all that money, but we're not going to let that happen. Starting next year, American drug prices will come down fast and furious, and will soon be among the lowest in the developed world. So in other words, whatever the lowest price for a certain drug, of which these companies make much of it, whatever the lowest price is, that price will come down to that price. So we will get the lowest price anywhere in the world. If they're lower in England than they are in Germany, we take the England price. As of today, 14 out of 17 largest pharmaceutical companies have now agreed. 14 out of 17. Oh, those three they're in deep trouble. But actually, they've agreed because I think those three companies are coming in at a different time next week. So they've agreed. Johnson & Johnson is one of them, right?
After the holidays.
Why? They couldn't do it faster?
No, we're going to be talking about Trump RX.
Oh, okay. Trump RX. Trump RX is doing well. As of today, 14 out of the 17 largest pharmaceutical companies, but they've all agreed, have now agreed to drastically lower drug prices for their American patients, for the American people and patients. This represents the greatest victory for patient affordability in the history of American health care by far, and every single American will benefit. So this is the biggest thing ever to happen on drug pricing and on health care. This will have a tremendous impact on health care itself. I want to thank Sanofi CEO Paul Hudson. Paul? Hi, Paul. I hope they have you in some order. I'll be checking.
Alphabetical, yes, but...
Okay, well, we'll do the best we can. Thank you, Paul. Great company, by the way. Novartis CEO Vas Narasimhan. Thank you very much, Vas. Great job. Genentech CEO Ashley Megaragri. Where are you, Ashley? How are you? Hi. Thank you very much. Great companies. Behringer Inc. President John Michael Bors. John Michael, thank you very much. Gilead CEO Dan O'Day. Dan? Thank you, Dan. Great job. It's a good company. Bristol Myers Squibb Executive Vice President Carrie Gallman. Carrie? Thank you, Don. Thank you very much. GSK CEO Emma Wormsley. Emma? Thank you very much, Emma. Great job. Merck CEO Rob Davis. Great company. Thank you. Great company. How long have you been CEO?
Almost 5 years.
Very good. You're doing a good job. And Amgen Executive Vice President and CFO Peter Griffith. Peter? Thank you, Peter, very much. Thank you very much. You okay? Fake news. We want you to be healthy. Are you all right? The camera's not okay, but she's okay. That's more important. We have good medicine for you if you need some medicine. One of them can take good care of it. We're also joined by Secretaries Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., Howard Lutnick, ambassador, and really some incredible ambassadors, Administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, and the FDA Commissioner, Marty McCary. They're doing a phenomenal job. Thank you. Thank you, fellas. Good job. For decades, Americans have been forced to pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs by far, not just a little bit. We were like a whipping post, the United States, and it's just been 4% of the world's population. We have 4% of the world's population, and consumers pay only 13% of all prescription drugs, yet pharmaceutical companies make 75% of their profits. Think of that. So we have 4% of the population, 13% of prescription drugs, and yet the people behind me, who are wonderful people, make 75% of their profits from the American customer. So they understood that better than anybody, that We have to do something. That's why I signed an executive order instructing my administration to do everything in its power to slash prescription drug prices for Americans while getting other countries to pay more. And we don't want more. We want this fair. We want to pay the same thing. They used to blame it, remember, on research and development. And I said, well, research and development for everybody. And everybody understood it. As a result, the United Kingdom's National Health Service agreed to pay the fair share for prescription drugs for the first time in 26 years. And we expect other countries in Europe will do the same. And if they don't, we're going to put tariffs on them, and we'll get the same amount of money, plus we'll take a nice return on the money. We signed historic agreements with Pfizer, Eli Lilly, AstraZeneca, Novo Nordisk, and EMD, Serrano, to reduce prices by 300, 400, 500, 600, and even 700%, and sometimes even more than that. I remember when I had a news conference in my first term, I was the first president that reduced prices from the beginning of my term to a year, from January to December, 0.25%. And I thought it was the greatest thing because it's the first one in 28 years. Now we're talking about numbers that are so incredible. 0.25%. Think of that. I was proud of it because it hadn't happened in 28 where drug prices went down. Well, now you're going to see numbers that nobody would believe possible. Think of that. 500, 600, 700, 800%. Today we're building on these accomplishments. The companies assembled in this room have agreed to offer all of their drugs to Medicaid and most favored nations pricing. You're going to get most favored nations pricing, meaning they're going to pay our country the lowest price paid anywhere in the world. And they will list their most popular drugs on TrumpRx.gov. TrumpRx.gov. And I didn't name it that. Somebody named it that. And I guess they assumed that was, did you name it, Oz, or Bobby name it?
We all named it together.
Okay, well, I'm honored to have the name. And so far that's turned out because the numbers are so incredible. It's an honor. And you're going to get massive discounts to all consumers. So massive discounts will be not even offered. It's just going to be a fact. All consumers will get massive discounts. That's TrumpRx.gov. Every new drug produced by these companies in the future will permanently be offered to American patients at most favored nation prices. You know, people used to talk about that for years, but nobody ever did anything about it. No other president did. And it wasn't easy, but it worked out great, and I'm so proud of the people behind me. As an example of the price reductions we have secured through these new agreements, Santa Fe will cut the cost of its blood thinner, Plavix, from $750 to less than $16. Wow. Where's Santa Fe? Where are you? What? That's incredible, huh? Could have gone to $17, maybe. That's amazing. And you're going to do tremendous business. You're going to do much more business. So that's coming from $750. Think of that, $750. And that's the number one blood thinner. I don't want to know about that. I take an aspirin. To less than $16. Think of that. Bristol Myers Squibb, a great company, both great companies, will cut the price of HIV medication, Raytaz, from nearly $1,500, $1,500 to $217. And it will cut the cost of hepatitis B medication, Baraclude, from $1,400 to $413. Gilead will cut the hepatitis C medication, Epclusa, from nearly $25,000 to less than $2,500. And all prices are like that because we're bringing them down to the world's lowest price, everything. And these people really are pioneers. What they're doing is so great. And in the end, they're going to do much more business, and it's. I think it's going to even out for them as a company. The countries will have to pay more, but even for them, because of the fact that the world is quite a bit bigger, it won't be very severe, I hope. I also want to thank these companies and their incredible executives for their generous contribution to American national security, because it's really what it is. It's, to a large extent, national security in addition. You can't continue to pay 13, 14 times more than other countries and think you're going to have security. Collectively, they will invest over $150 billion to build up domestic pharmaceutical manufacturing in America. They're going to be, because of tariffs, they're coming in. And I think because of the love of our country, it may be because of the November 5th election, but because of tariffs, they're going to be coming in. They're building already. Just about all of them have started. They're building their plants in all states all over the country, and they're building incredible pharmaceutical plants. We're going to have close to 100% of our pharmaceuticals in a very short period of time made in the USA. As part of these agreements, Merck will also donate 3.5 tons of antibacterials to be placed in America's strategic reserve. Thank you very much. GSX will donate over 200 pounds of ingredients to make rescue inhalers, which is a big deal, and Bristol-Myers Squibb will donate 6.5 tons of blood thinners. We appreciate it. Such amazing companies. Every president for a generation has promised to reduce drug prices, but they were talking about a little bit like that. I am the only one of them to ever even think in terms of favored nations, and that's what this is. Favored nations. It's called most favored nation. We are now a most favored nation. I want to thank the leaders in the room, and I also want to thank the leaders of all of the countries that had to pay a little more so that we were treated fairly. I really do. I want to thank the leaders of countries. And they knew the alternative was not much of an alternative, because if they didn't do it, we were going to charge them tariffs, and the tariffs would have been much more severe than what they did. But they did do it as soon as they realized about the tariffs. Then they did it very easily. No, they're very good people. Let's start with Amgen's Executive Vice President, who I already introduced, and I introduced the people here. So I'd like to ask Bobby and Oz to say a few words, and also I'd like to ask if anybody would like to speak on behalf of your company, or just say how great this country is doing. And you're all building tremendous facilities now in the United States instead of other countries that we all know about. But if you'd like to say something. So Oz, do you want to start? And Bobby?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Mr. President, he gets taller with time here. Mr. President, each of the 9 CEOs will speak very briefly about what they have done, because it is a patriotic effort. This is affordability in action. We talk about it in abstract, but this is not an abstract concept. This is a very concrete, tangible, personal reality, because we've got moms with sick children who cannot afford their medications. Working families cannot make ends meet. Seniors on fixed income. We have 80 million people who have to pay more than $100 a month for their prescriptions. They just can't keep up. So this is a hardcore approach to this, driven by a bold leader who's taken bold action. With that bold action, we've now created a standard for the industry. The 9 leaders behind us run the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. They're joining 5 other companies that have been through this White House process over the last 2 months. I want to make sure you appreciate that it doesn't happen with just the people in the room. They're wonderful individuals: Chris Klump, Inma Hernandez, John Brooks, Theo Merkel, Corey, Heidi. A lot of folks worked their tails off to make this happen, and that's why we've gotten to the finish line. The prices that President Trump left to the next administration on pharmaceuticals have gone up 25% until the president took office. We are reversing that trend and making sure that Americans can afford to get the life-saving solutions, because if these brilliant innovators create solutions to cancer and hypertension, hepatitis, and a bunch of other viruses, illnesses that have been lethal throughout human history, but you can't afford them, then we're not treating you fairly. And that's why what the president has done is so critically important. He mentioned quickly the amount of money that they've contributed towards our strategic stockpile and to building in this country. But fundamentally, the health of the American people will benefit because this president took bold action. And from my personal position, I couldn't do anything I do without Secretary Kennedy, who just does not take no for an answer and will call me even more than the president does to make sure things happen right. Mr. Secretary. Even more.
That's not nice. I don't think that's true. I think we got a lot of calls from the president, and at one point in this negotiation, we both stopped answering our phones late at night because we couldn't take it anymore. But I want to thank you, Mr. President, for doing this. President Trump, when he was up here a moment ago, talked about how historic this is and how every one of the news outlets in here ought to have World War III size headlines about this. And I was reminded about how astonishing this achievement is. A couple of days ago, when one of my sons, 29 years old, very, very left-wing Democrat, and disagrees with a lot of the policies of this administration, he called me and he said, Dad, I want to tell you how proud I am about this. This is the best achievement that could happen to our country. This is something Bernie Sanders has been clamoring for 25 years. Elizabeth Warren has been clamoring for. Joe Biden promised the American people. President Obama, President Clinton all promised to do this for the American people. All of them expressed their outrage, their indignation that we are paying 1/10 in some cases the price of drugs that they're selling in Europe. We developed them here. We manufactured some of them in New Jersey. We were paying $1,300 for a drug manufactured in New Jersey. The same drug manufactured in the same plant was being sold for $88 in London. And everybody recognized how unfair this was. We were paying for all the innovation in this country. And yet, the rest of the world was free riding on it. And President Trump told me and Dr. Oz at the beginning of this term, this is what I want you to do. And he leaned on us. I think both of us were very skeptical at that point that it could be done. But I would say this is a miracle. And I'm very grateful to all the CEOs who saw the sense in this, who understood the injustice and the unsustainability of the system, and who put public health, and particularly the public health of Americans, ahead of some of their other priorities. And all of them came to the table, and President Trump asked us to do three things. One, to deliver the lowest prices in the world and make this affordable for Americans. Number two, to do it in a way that we would not hurt innovation, that we would keep America as the incubator and the dominating force in innovation around the world. And three, to bring drug manufacturing home to this country. I can tell you by the end of this term, 95% of the drugs we will have MFN. In other words, Americans will be paying the lowest price in the world for 95% of the drugs. You talk about affordability. People are talking about affordability. Nobody has done anything for affordability greater than this. So I want to thank you, President Trump, for your leadership, for your vision, and for your relentless harassment of us to make sure this all got done. And I really want to just thank all of the CEOs, all these companies, for coming to the table in good faith, working out a very, very pragmatic agreement that allows them to continue to do the innovation that is going to save lives and alleviate suffering around the world, and do it in a way that is more fair to the American people. Thank you.
So we're going to, Howard first. So this is an example of what President Trump does. It's the entire administration, the whole government working together. Bobby and I met at the beginning of the administration of how we could work together to bring drug prices down, as the president instructed, and bring manufacturing home. So they've said they're going to have 95% of the drugs be at the lowest price in the world. And when we walked in, and the president walked in, we were making about 16% of our drugs were being made in America. right? And we are having hundreds, the people behind us are committed hundreds of billions of dollars to bring their manufacturing here and bring their research here. And that employs Americans and keeps our drugs produced safely. You want to know when you take that drug is made in America, overseen by the FDA, and it is safe. So the president not only is driving prices down, he's doing a 1-2 punch of bringing production here. And the third thing he's doing is when you take that drug, you know it was made in America, protected by Americans, and it's safe. And I can't be more proud. I think this is the most impressive thing I've ever seen, because none of you, and maybe even none of us, thought this was possible. Only President Trump, he knew it, he drove it, and he has delivered it here today. And I can't be more proud to be standing next to him, because this is delivering for America.
Thank you. Very good. We'll start with Amgen. It is alphabetical. If you'd like to say something, feel free to do that. They're all going to say something short, so go ahead. Good. Well, you go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President.
To the podium.
To the podium. Here we go. We're going to move it back up, get taller again. Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to work with you to improve the affordability of medicines for American patients. Amgen recently launched Amgen Now, a direct-to-patient option for Repatha that cuts out PBM middlemen and significantly improves affordability for people who are uninsured, facing high out-of-pocket costs, or paying on their own. Repatha will also soon be added to TrumpRx.com. A U.S.-based pioneer for more than 4 decades, we've invested more than $40 billion in U.S. research and manufacturing since 2018, supported by pro-innovation policies that you've championed. Thank you again, Mr. President. We look forward to continuing to work together to deliver meaningful benefits and innovation for U.S. patients.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jean-Michel Boers from Boehringer Ingelheim. It's a true honor to be here for an agreement that we believe will make a true difference for American patients. For 140 years, Boehringer Ingelheim, a family-owned company, has been committed to improving health and outcomes to save lives of patients. With today's agreement, we believe that we have actually struck the delicate balance that there is to protect America's leadership in research and innovation, and at the same time ensure that patients pay a fair price for their medicines. So from rare diseases in oncology or pulmonary fibrosis, where we do research into chronic diseases, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, obesity maybe in the future, I will go quick. We will continue to work for the American patients. We are onshoring manufacturing to the U.S. to very rapidly, within the time of this administration, have the majority of our products produced in the U.S. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bristol Myers Squibb is an American company that for more than 6,500 years has been protecting and extending American lives. And today I'll make 2 very brief announcements. One, we are very proud to announce that we will provide Eliquis, our #1 prescribed medicine, to Medicaid for free. We're also answering the administration's calls, as the President said, to shore up the national medicine reserves by donating more than 6.5 tons of Eliquis. These actions build on BMS's commitment to invest $40 billion in the U.S. in research and development and manufacturing. And these investments reflect our enduring commitment to work with the administration to improve patient lives. So thank you.
It's incredible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for shining a light on the importance of our innovation and getting all countries to pay for this innovation. I'm proud to represent Genentech, America's first biotech company. We are offering our flu medicine, which is very important this year given the severity of the flu, Xofluza, for $50 direct to patients, and that's a 70% price reduction, and that also will be available on TrumpRx. We're also very proud of our $50 billion investment in U.S. manufacturing and new research labs. Our new facility in North Carolina will bring 11,000 jobs to America. These are important steps forward for Americans and also for patients. Thank you very much.
I saw your rendering is beautiful, what you're building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, to you and the administration. I think this objective of achieving the commitment to affordability and future innovation is extraordinary. And let me just say that the company I represent, Gilead Sciences, the scientists reach for cures every day. In fact, they've come up with medicines that have cured both certain forms of hepatitis and also certain forms of blood cancer. And we just recently launched a new medicine that's only given twice a year to prevent HIV. And we're working with Secretary Kennedy and his entire team, as well as the State Department, as a part of your ex-U.S. strategy to support ending the epidemic really during your term. And so we look forward to working with you on that. I've never been more optimistic about the innovation that exists across these companies and the impact this can have on America's health and economy. Thank you very much.
Well with HIV.
Yeah, it literally prevents HIV almost 100% given twice a year. And so the America First State Department strategy, we've partnered with them, and we're also partnering with Secretary Kennedy and his team. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
GSK cares deeply about improving the affordability of medicines, which is why today we're announcing for the 40 million Americans who live with asthma or COPD, we're going to be significantly lowering the cost of the medicines they rely on to breathe more easily every day. We're going to be going direct on 8 of our core medicines with deep discounts, and we're investing in American health security by donating the ingredients that go into rescue inhalers like this one so that people can access them when they need them. This triple win is on top of our commitment to invest $30 billion in American manufacturing, American research, American technology, and American talent. And all of this to do the right thing for American patients, whether that's John in North Carolina, who says he can now visit with his granddaughters without worrying whether will have to struggle for breath, or Marsha in Kentucky, who says if her asthma inhaler is cheaper, she can properly celebrate with her family this holidays. Mr. President, thank you so much for your ambition for American patients and for the partnership of all of your teams so we get ahead of disease together.
Thank you very much. Very much. Great company.
Mr. President, as the others have said, I just want to say thank you for your leadership. I reflect on your goal of driving affordability and access to Americans, but equally getting prices up outside the United States, and we're 100% supportive of your actions. As many of the colleagues have talked about, I represent Merck, and we also are looking to what we can do on TrumpRx.gov. In addition to bringing in our diabetes drugs, one of the things I just wanted to highlight, we have a novel oral cardiovascular drug, which has an opportunity to meaningfully lower LDL and really still go after what is the leading cause of death in the United States, which is cardiovascular disease. Kills 1 million people in the United States annually. And thanks to TrumpRx.com, you will not only be able to get this pill and have an easy-to-take pill, but it'll be easy to get and it'll be affordable. So I appreciate your leadership and look forward to continuing to partner with you. Thank you.
Great company. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, my name is Vas Narasimhan, CEO of Novartis. Novartis is a 250-year-old company, and today we're the global leader in bringing advanced technologies to patients in the United States around the world, technologies like radioligand therapies and cell and gene therapies. What I want to highlight to you is we're bringing the manufacturing of these technologies to the United States now. We've committed to build 9 new facilities. 7 of them we already have a groundbreaking for. Dr. Makari was with me in North Carolina. We were opening up 4 new plants. Our plan is to scale manufacturing here and ensure all our critical medicines, including these most advanced technologies, are made here in the United States for U.S. patients.
Thank you very much.
So first of all, thank you, Mr. President. I think you've convened on an extremely important subject and made more progress than perhaps anybody ever thought was frankly possible. For Sanofi, this is another day to reaffirm our commitment to patients, our unwavering support to trying to do the right thing to help patients get better outcomes. But simply, affordability has been at the heart of that for a very long time. Having concluded this contract with the President and the administration, we find ourselves able, as a joint effort, to go further than we ever thought was possible. And that's kudos to you and for what you have done. Improving affordability and preserving innovation and rewarding innovation is a very difficult balance to take. I think we feel the negotiations and the conversations have had the patient at the centre throughout the entire time, as difficult as it may have been on occasions. I think what many can learn from the way this was handled, put simply, is that when you bring industry and you bring government together with the spirit of doing the right thing for patients, it is almost limitless what can be achieved. So on behalf of Sanofi, I'd like to thank you, Mr. President, and the team for what has been simply an incredible amount of progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. So, as I watch, these are the greatest business leaders, and they're beyond that. Many are doctors, and they ended up running the biggest businesses in the country. But you've done so much, and you made it a lot easier than we thought it would be. You were just, you understood to do the right thing. And as I was watching, and I know all of them, not personally, a couple of them personally, but I know them all through reading lots of business magazines and other magazines and newspapers. These are highly respected people. And I said to myself, look at what they've done. They've done something that, and as you said, something that you never thought was possible to get done. Most people thought for the United States to have favored nations where we have the lowest drug price in the world is unthinkable. And I said to myself, we have a thing called the Unaffordable Care Act. It's unaffordable because the insurance companies make so much money, and the insurance companies totally control the Democrats. And I said to myself, standing watching these great leaders, and we have 4 other leaders coming in, Johnson & Johnson and 4 other very big companies, actually, very great companies. They've all agreed, and they'll be coming in next week, and we appreciate them too. But they've agreed to the same thing, lowest price anywhere in the world. I said, I think that the insurance companies, we should have a meeting and we should talk to them. Because I would say that maybe with one talk, they would be willing to cut their prices by 50, 60, or 70%. They've made a fortune. They've had stock prices that have gone up 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and even 18. Think of this. They went up 1,800%. One of them went up. Numbers that nobody's ever seen before. They had a nice return, not a 2%, an 1,800% return. One went up more than that. Therefore, there's a lot of fat that can be cut. And I'd like to announce here, this is just an idea that I had standing here, watching these great leaders saying that we're going to have the lowest prices anywhere in the world, something that nobody would have thought possible. And they're going to come out great. But also donating incredible different medications, medications that are world-famous medications that one or another of them make, and donating them in some cases for free or very, very low prices. And I said, I'll bet you if I called a meeting of the insurance companies, the companies that are involved with healthcare costs, I would be willing to bet, I think, that they would reduce their prices very, very substantially. We could have fair health care in the country. Now, my initial thought, and this is what I want to do as of right now, this is the alternative, is that all of the billions and billions, ultimately trillions and trillions of dollars that's paid to these companies, we're going to pay directly to the people. But there's another way of doing it, and that's getting the insurance companies to ease up and to cut their pricing way, way down and stay part of the system. So I'm going to call a meeting. It could be in Florida this coming week, or it could be back in the White House the first week, not the second or third week. I'm going to call a meeting of the big insurance companies that have gotten so rich by receiving money, and really much, far, far more money than they're entitled to. And I have a feeling maybe if they would act like these incredible, brilliant, responsible citizens behind me, people that love our country, and they love the world. I mean, frankly, these are international companies for the most part. I'm going to call a meeting of the insurance companies. I'm going to see if they get their price down, to put it very bluntly. And I think that is a very big statement. And what happened here is the biggest statement of all, because nobody thought a thing like this was possible. And I think based on that, I won't even take questions today, because there's no way I can take questions that are anywhere comparable to what you just witnessed. You just witnessed drug prices that will go down at levels never thought even possible, Marty, right? Never thought even possible. And I think that the second biggest part of this meeting is going to be the fact that I'm going to call in the insurance companies that are making so much money and they have to make less, a lot less. And maybe we can have reasonable health care without having to cut them out and let it all go awry. So we're going to be calling a meeting. It'll be either in Florida or it'll be here the first week. And I'd prefer not talking and asking questions only for the reason that this is such a big announcement, meaning what these people have said and what the other four companies are going to say, which is exactly the same thing, that I really don't want to soil it up by asking questions, even questions that are very fair questions that I'd love to answer. So I think we have to just stop right here. I really appreciate the fact that these companies came here. These, again, a lot of the media is not aware, not really cognizant of the people standing behind me. These are the biggest executives in the world. And what they're doing today is monumental. And I want to stand it on that. And I'll see you later if you'd like. But I don't want to be asking questions having to do with anything else. I do want you to remember what I said about the 4.5%. We took 100% of the new workers was in the private sector, and we've cut tremendous numbers of government jobs. And that's why, if you look at our numbers, they're so good. Also, more than, I don't know if you've read this, came out a week ago, more than 50% of our trade deficit was cut. We cut it more than 50% in a period of a few months. Nobody thought any of these things were possible. Thank you very much, everybody.
Your insurance idea? Thank you about your insurance idea, Mr. President. Thank you, press.
Invite them to the Oval Office. Invite them to the Oval Office. Have you seen the Oval Office? They haven't seen the Oval Office? Come on in.
Can we ask you about your name going on the Kennedy Center? Thank you, press. Thank you, press. So your name is now on the Kennedy Center. Can we ask you about that? Thank you. Thank you, press.
What will you tell the insurance companies, Mr. President?
All right, so you see the president right there leaving the Roosevelt Room at the White House, speaking about lower drug prices. You saw that for the past 30 minutes or so. Of course, earlier in the broadcast, we saw the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, from the State Department having his end-of-year press conference. So two press conferences of sorts today. Of course, not really one at the end of that speech there, or that announcement that was scheduled for 1 o'clock. But we do know that later tonight, President Trump will be in Rocky Mount, North Carolina to deliver a speech. And you can catch that live coverage starting right at 4 o'clock. So in about 55 minutes from now, as it's 3:05 Eastern time, we'll be live from Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Once again, I'm Matthew Alvarez. Good afternoon. Welcome back into Studio B as we get ready for kind of a rally kind of vibes. As you know, when we speak with the Patriots outside the venues at various events that President Trump's speaking at. This broadcast brought to you by a number of great sponsors, including All Family Pharmacy. Speaking of drug prices and all of that, well, this pharmacy here, we always try to point you toward companies that actually support your freedom and give you real choices, and that's exactly why we trust All Family Pharmacy. They're not your traditional pharmacy pushing, flu shots. All Family Pharmacy is different. They give you options, encourage you to take charge of your health, stay prepared, and have the right medications on hand before sickness hits. And of course, during the holidays, that's important. The travel, the cold weather, depending on where you live out there in the country, the family gatherings. This is when everyone can unfortunately get sick. So the question is, why wait until someone is miserable and you're scrambling for appointments or pharmacy lines? All Family Pharmacy has everything your family might need. Antivirals, antibiotics, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, mebendazole, even emergency kits and supplements, all doctor-reviewed and delivered fast to your door. So while you're out doing some of that holiday shopping, there's nothing wrong, of course, with adding a few essential medications your family might need. You could stock up, you could stay prepared, and keep your family healthy this Christmas season. Visit allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN to get that 10% off there. RSBN 10 is the promo code. Let's move on to our next broadcast sponsor, MyPillow.com. Merry Christmas, as we see there from the MyPillow.com/RSBN, the great Mike Lindell, of course. A lot of great products on MyPillow, as many of you in America know about, and a lot of you have MyPillow products. I know my family and I do here as well, and we have a few more things we'd like to purchase, actually. So MyPillow.com/RSBN is the place to go to do that. A great sponsor here at Right Side. Also, if you'd like to donate to Right Side at all you have to do is text RSBN to 801-801 or go to rsbnetwork.com/donate. For all of us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, again, all about God, family, country, freedom, common sense, truth, justice, and the American way. We'll see you at 4 o'clock from North Carolina. I'm Matthew Alvarez. We'll see you then.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed. So join us and be part of the right side of history.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from Diamond and Silk Chit Chat Live. Look, don't forget to watch my show right here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. It's imperative that you do so, okay? Bye-bye.
allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. You can scan that QR code now, RSBN10. That is the code, easy to remember, for 10% off. This is ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, antibiotics that will save you and yours from bacterial and viral infections, NAD+, and much, much more. 200 essential medications and emergency medical kits, the meds you trust delivered to your door.